Evening, everyone, and welcome. I will call this Bloomington City Council meeting to order. Tonight is Monday, January 27th. Thank you all for being here this evening with us. Thanks to everybody who is watching online. We will start our meeting as we always do. If you are able, please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Once again, thank you for joining us this evening. Council, good to see everybody. We have, our first order of business tonight is to adopt our agenda. And I've lost it in the mess that's up here. Our agenda this evening, under our introductory items, we have item 2.1, an introduction of new employees. I think we have one new employee in our legal staff that we're going to be meeting this evening. We have two proclamations. Item 2.2 is a proclamation for Black History Month, and item 2.3 is a proclamation for Winter Salt Week. And item 2.4, we'll get an update from our friends at Metro Transit, including our Metro Transit Commissioner here, who is here to talk about new bus service and the bus service, the Metro Transit service as it affects Bloomington. So looking forward to that. Moving on to item 3, our consent business. Councilmember Mua has our consent agenda tonight, and I do want to point out, Council, I think the original agenda that came out in the original packet had item 3.12, the approval purchase of unleaded and diesel fuels. That has been removed just because there was a couple of things with it, so it was been removed. So I think it might even be on at least a couple of your sheets, but it is no longer there. So we've got 11 items on our consent business. Item 4 are hearings, resolutions, and ordinances. We have one public hearing this evening regarding our cable franchise renewal ordinance. And then under 5, our organizational business, we have a couple of study items. One is on our co-living single-room occupancy standards review. We will get an update on our small business programming, and then have a discussion about our city council involvement on boards and commissions. And we will wrap up, as we always do, with our city council policy and issue update. Council, unless there's anything to add or corrections to be made, I would move the agenda as stated. Again, noting that item 3.12 has been removed on the consent agenda.
Second.
Got a motion and a second by Councilmember Carter to approve tonight's agenda. No further council discussion on this. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 6-0, noting that Councilmember Rivas is not with us this evening. So now that we have an agenda, we'll get to it. Item 2.1, an introduction of new employees. And as I said, I believe it is a new member of our legal team. Ms. Manderscheid.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. She's here if you'd like her to come up to the podium.
Absolutely.
All right, while she's making her way, this is our newest hire in the legal department. I'm pulling up her bio as we tap dance here. All right. Mary Claire Mulcahy joined us a month ago?
2 months ago.
2 months ago. Time flies when you're having fun. She obtained her bachelor's degree in journalism from the University of Wisconsin at Madison. I know we have some Badger fans here. And attended the University of St. Thomas. Well, not here. And attended the University of St. Thomas for law school. After graduation, she clerked for 2 Minnesota Supreme Court justices, and she joins us from private practice where she litigated complex class actions. She's primarily assigned to finance, public works, IT, and public health.
Good evening. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here with us tonight. If you could go over to the mic.
Yes.
Thank you very much. We're very happy to have you. And what specifically are you focusing on within our legal department?
So I'm advising the departments that Melissa mentioned. So pretty much whatever legal issues or contracts they have, they send my way, and I help advise them representing the city.
Very good. Good. Well, I appreciate you being with us tonight and being introduced to the public at large. We tell people our employees are basically the face of the city of Bloomington. And so it's kind of it's an honor, but also a responsibility, because when people see you, they think of the city of Bloomington. And so turn over that trust to you to represent us in the best way possible. And thank you very much for being here. Thanks
Absolutely.
for joining the city of Bloomington.
Thank you. It's been a privilege to represent the city thus far. Thank
Welcome.
you.
Thanks. Council's items 2.2 and 2.3 are proclamations, and I'm going to make my way down to the podium. We have a proclamation for Black History Month, February 2025. Obviously, we have Chief Hodges up here with us, and we have members of the Kappa Alpha Psi fraternity in the Bloomington Richfield alumni chapter, including the president, Mr. Larry McKenzie, who's going to be speaking here in just a moment. But I will read the proclamation first, and we will be on our way. I think it's lined up there. It's a proclamation for Black History Month, February 2025. Whereas Dr. Carter G. Woodson, founder of the Association for the Study of African American Life and History in 1915, initiated Negro History Week in 1926 as a way of highlighting the involvement and accomplishments of Black Americans in the development of our nation's democracy. And whereas, as part of the nation's bicentennial, Negro History Week was expanded to Black History Month in 1976. And whereas, during Black History Month, we acknowledge, honor, and celebrate the many achievements and contributions made by Black Americans to our nation's economic, cultural, spiritual, and political development. And whereas, by observing Black History Month, provides us with an opportunity to gain a deeper understanding of Black history as American history in the United States, and to acknowledge the centuries of struggles for equity and freedom, as well as the achievements and successes. And whereas, in 2021, to celebrate Black History Month, the Office of Racial Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging introduced Bloomington Pioneers and Changemakers, a profile series featuring local Black leaders who are working to advance civil rights and remove barriers to equity. And whereas in this annual profile series, the city honors pioneers who have done so much to chart the path to where we are today, and changemakers who are paving the way for future generations. And whereas each year we will continue to highlight and honor dedicated Black leaders in the city of Bloomington. Now, therefore, I, Mayor Tim Bussey, do hereby proclaim February 2025 as Black History Month in Bloomington, dated this 27th day of January 2025. It truly is an honor to do this presentation and to be standing up here with these distinguished gentlemen. And I would love you all to introduce yourself, but I do want to point out, I do want to introduce our speaker who's going to step up, Larry McKenzie, who, as I said, is the chapter president for the fraternity, but also is, in the discussion of most successful high school basketball coaches in the state of Minnesota history, he's certainly in that discussion. And not only as an outstanding basketball coach, but as a mentor and a leader and a shaper of young men. And I saw it firsthand, and the outstanding work that he does. And it's an honor to have you here with us, Larry, and it's great to see you again. And I'm going to turn the microphone over to you now. And as I said, only 45 minutes or so is all we have. So it's
Well, my speech I wrote was about for 2 hours, so. But anyway, on behalf of the Richfield Bloomington Alumni Chapter, I want to say thank you to the City of Bloomington for recognizing our organization, which has been around for 114 years, build on achievement in every field of human endeavor. And so we are excited about the work that we've started in this area of Bloomington, and under the guidance, and even though I'm the president, get a lot of the guidance from the chief about what needs to be done in the city and how we can help. And so we're happy to be here and happy to be contributors to this community on behalf of Richfield Bloomington alumni.
Thank you, sir. And anyone else? Chief? Again, 45 minutes.
Oh, I'm quick. So again, thank you, City, for this. Obviously, I've been a member of this fraternity, I think 27 years in March for me. So it's one of the best organizations I've ever had the opportunity to be a part of, and then the work that the organization is going to do in this community. And I don't think there is anybody in the state who's built up more young men than Coach McKenzie. So it couldn't be better deserved than to have the members of the illustrious Kappa Alpha Psi get this proclamation. So thank you.
Thank you.
And now, of course, we have to do the grip and grin. So when we step over this way, get the microphone out of the way. We'll do this, gentlemen. Come on in.
Come on, Antonio, step in.
Very good.
One more.
Oh.
Thank
Thank you. Our second proclamation tonight is for Winter Salt Week. It's winter, I think you all noticed, and you all know that when it comes down to being able to travel in Minnesota roads, road salt is incredibly important in terms of ice control and just making our roads passable. But with all of the good comes some challenges and some negative effects as well. And so we have a proclamation regarding Winter Salt Week, and then I'm going to turn the microphone over to Luann Waddick, who is Minnesota Water Steward, and we will learn more about this. Proclamation Winter Salt Week, January 27th through the 31st, 2025. Whereas the City of Bloomington relies on de-icing salt as part of its winter maintenance program to maintain safe and accessible roadways. And whereas all the salt applied to roadways ends up in our freshwater. And whereas chloride contamination from de-icing salt has been found in lakes, streams, and groundwater in Bloomington's 9 Mile Creek watershed and across the state. And whereas reducing overuse of de-icing salt reduces damage to infrastructure and property, protects freshwater resources, and reduces harm to aquatic plants and animals. And whereas it is crucial to raise awareness among residents, businesses, and local government agencies about the responsible use of de-icing salt to protect both public safety and the long-term health of our freshwater resources. And whereas Winter Salt Week provides an opportunity to educate our community about the responsible use of de-icing salt, including environmental considerations and effective application methods. And whereas the residents of Bloomington can contribute to de-icing salt pollution reduction efforts locally by learning about smart salting practices, engaging in safe winter driving, hiring trained service providers, and participating in the Low Salt, No Salt Minnesota program. And whereas the city is committed to promoting a sustainable approach to winter maintenance for the benefit of present and future generations. Now, therefore, I, Mayor Tim Bussey, do hereby proclaim January 27th through the 31st, 2025, as Winter Salt Week in the City of Bloomington, and urge all residents and businesses and city departments to take part in activities and initiatives that promote the responsible use of de-icing salt and encourage the adoption of winter maintenance strategies which maintain safety while reducing environmental harm. Dated this 27th day of January, 2025. As I said, it's definitely winter here in the state of Minnesota, and I think sometimes we take for granted the ability to get from point A to point B. All you have to do is look at from a dusting to 10 inches of snow anywhere south of about the Mason-Dixon line and realize just how fortunate we are to have the infrastructure in place to be able to travel and to maintain our lives during the winter months. De-icing salt is part of that, but as I just read and as we are learning, the responsible use of de-icing salt is an important part of this, just to make sure that our freshwater and groundwater sources remain uncontaminated. So I'm going to turn it over to Luann Waddick and give her the microphone, and I think we've got props here as well, which is exciting to see. Very good.
A few props. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, City Council, for passing this proclamation. Really grateful. So I am Luann Waddick, and I'm a Minnesota Water Steward trained in watershed science, water science. And I'm also a part of a group, Stop Oversalting. And we've been working, I just moved here from Edina, so we've been working in Edina and at the state legislature for a long time and trying to get a reduction of salt, stop oversalting. So if you heard the speaker today on our series, which started today, there's a speaker every day on Zoom for a half an hour talking about the issues of water and salt. She noted that we put down 20 to 30 million tons a year, million tons a year in the United States. Minnesota puts down, my notes, I'm going back and forth, 445,000 tons a year. So we're really loading our environment with salt. Salt is a toxic, permanent pollutant. In Germany, you're not even allowed to put salt down. You're fined if you do. It's toxic. It's permanent. We can't remove it from our waterways. In the metro area, we have 67 impaired water bodies, and that's only the ones that we've tested. We don't know how many others are. 75 we know are at high risk. No surprise, because we're putting so much down on our roadways. What else do I want to tell you? So 1 teaspoon of salt permanently pollutes 5 gallons of water. And there's no way to remove it from these lakes that are impaired. You would have to do reverse osmosis on the whole lake. So once a lake or water body is impaired, that's it. So it behooves us to prevent it in the first place. Let's see, what else? 70% of the salt we put down stays right here. It doesn't go anywhere. It's in our soil, in our vegetation. It's disrupting our ecosystems and our freshwater fish and invertebrates. So I'm very happy that Edina has passed this proclamation in order to educate. Bloomington. What did I say, Edina? To educate the public at large. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Luann. And I'm going to turn it over to Brian Greedle, our Water Resource Manager. I also want to call out, we've got a couple of equipment operators here with us. I want to read your names so I get them correctly. Tom Hilgert and Cooper Wobkin, our equipment operators in the city of Bloomington, are also here. Thank you for being here, gentlemen. Brian, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to follow up on Luann's comments. And, you know, salt is a permanent pollutant out there, and we don't have a BMP to remove it. So in the stormwater world, we often talk about different BMPs to reduce volume and nutrients and things of that nature, but we don't have a BMP to reduce the salt that's being put out there. And so the best way to reduce the salt being put out there is to eliminate it altogether. So I just wanted to highlight a couple of our guys who are responsible for Bloomington's decreasing salt trend over the last 10 years. So implementing lots of different technologies with our plow drivers, from segmented plow blades to pavement temperature guns on all of the snow plows out there, helping these guys make the best decisions they can to ensure that we maintain our level of service, but we are also being sensitive to the environment out there. So thank you, gentlemen.
All right, and now we do the grip and grin. Make sure we get a picture of everybody. Come on in, guys, don't be shy. Thank you. Thanks, Brian.
I have a spoon for you.
Oh, a spoon for me too?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect, thank you. I like that, thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. All right, item 2.4 on our agenda this evening. An update from our friends at Metro Transit, who are going to give us, as I said, an update on a variety of a number of the different transit issues within the city of Bloomington here, and not only within the city of Bloomington, but across the system, which I think is it's an important topic, and glad to have you here. Jen, who's going to kick us off? Oh. Our Bloomington representative on the city council, John Pacheco. Good evening, sir. Welcome.
This side, that side?
You pick it. This side, in the microphone, though. This side facing us. Yes, perfect.
There you go. All right, thank you.
And you can pull the microphone close to you. Just
All right, we got it?
perfect.
I'm going to get instructions. Hold
Yep, she's in charge.
It's not on. Let's turn it on. There we go.
on. All right, thank you. Well, thank you all. Thank you all for inviting us over. It's nice when we can get out of the office or in our own committee meetings. We just left the transportation committee meeting to get over here, but it's nice to get us out there and hear about what you'd like us to do and what you keep you up to date on what we're doing. Again, my name is John Pacheco. I'm a District 5 council member. That includes Bloomington, Richfield, Fort Snelling, and about half of Edina and about 5 blocks of Minneapolis where I live. I don't know how they come up with the map, but that's where it is. Actually, it's my second tour of duty. I was a Governor Perpich appointment about 30 years ago, and at that point, it was more Mucilines and housing. There wasn't, and waste. Waste has been with us as a program, and so I have that background. I also spent 18 years at Xcel Energy. The first 10 of that was I managed local government relations, so I've worked with siting and transmission lines, and all of that goes with it. So it's kind of back now, and I just got appointed by Walls in 2023, so now I'm back in the infrastructure business. Besides that, I'm president of the Latino Chamber of Commerce of Minnesota, and I'm also on the Historical Society Board of Directors. But we're excited today to have to come before you, like I said. And today we have Metro Transit General Manager Leslie Conderas and Manager of Service Development Adam Harrington, who will talk more about specifically about the work we're doing across our system, but highlight what we're doing in Bloomington as well. So we're making some exciting investments, and I think you'll like what we're going with, and working with you is but what we do best. And so with that, I'll pass it over to General Manager Conderas. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Ms. Conderas, good evening. Welcome.
All right. Good evening, Mayor Bussey, council members. Thank you for having us here this evening. As Councilmember Pacheco said, my name is Leslie Conderas. I'm the General Manager at Metro Transit. Tonight, I'm going to provide a bit of an overview of Metro Transit and some key initiatives underway, and then I'm going to hand it over to our Director of Service Development, Adam Harrington, who will go into more detail about upcoming service improvements and a few other topics pertaining to Bloomington. So we have a few slides, but are very interested in answering your questions, listening to your comments, and looking forward to the conversation tonight. So Metro Transit is, let me quick click, there we go. Metro Transit is a division of the Metropolitan Council. We operate bus, light rail, and commuter rail. We serve over 75 communities in the 7-county metro area. We have about 3,000 employees who provide this service day in and day out. And just to give you a few facts and figures about Metro Transit, we have about 700 buses, over 100 light rail trains, 6 locomotives, 18 passenger rail cars. I won't read you all the numbers pertaining to our facilities, but we have over 10,000 bus stops and bus shelters when you combine those figures. And we continue to expand our bus rapid transit network, which includes additional stations, numerous rail stations, park and rides, and transit centers. And stepping back, our overall mission at Metro Transit is we connect people, strengthen communities, and improve lives by delivering high-quality public transportation. Just a little bit about who we serve. So in 2024, we provided about 47.5 million rides last year. That's about a 6% increase over where we ended in 2023. As the chart on the right of this slide shows, we are not back to the ridership levels we were seeing before the COVID pandemic, but we are continuing to see ridership grow. And some of the investments you'll hear Mr. Harrington speak about tonight are part of our ongoing strategy to continue to make transit attractive and build ridership even further. When we have surveyed our riders on board transit, we know about 29% of our riders are between the ages of 18 and 24. A third earn less than $25,000 a year in their household. And currently, about 35% of the trips are for commute purposes, which is lower than what we saw when we did similar research back in 2016. Again, we believe that reflects some of the travel behavior changes we've seen since the start of the COVID pandemic. Some top destinations, riders tell us they're going to the downtowns in our region, particularly Minneapolis, St. Paul, the University of Minnesota, Mall of America, and the MSP Airport. Next couple of slides are relating to our safety and security work. As Metro Transit General Manager, there isn't a topic I am asked about more from people in the public, our riders, our own employees, than public safety on transit. It's a top priority of ours. Back in 2022, the Metropolitan Council endorsed Metro Transit's Safety and Security Action Plan, and this was after about 2 or so years of work that started shortly after the murder of George Floyd in 2020. The chair of the Metropolitan Council, Chair Zelli, called upon the council to review the Metro Transit Police Department, and that led to a transit safety conversation where over 1,000 people participated in various engagement work to share their experience on transit and their sense of what leads to a sense of safety while riding transit. From that work, the Metropolitan Council developed recommendations, and one of the recommendations was that Metro Transit develop an action plan. So we are in the process of continuing to implement our action plan. It's comprised of 3 areas of work: improving conditions on the system. So this includes strengthening presence on the system, improving our facilities. Some of the feedback we've heard from people is the importance not only of seeing official presence on our system, but also making sure places where people are waiting, where they're transferring, feel safe and secure. So looking at lighting, looking at how we can improve building design by really thinking through the design and ensuring we're designing with environmental practices in mind. So part of this is certainly making sure those conditions on the system are conducive of the feeling of safety. The second area of work is training and supporting our employees. Without employees, there is no transit, and certainly our employees have told us that there are ways we can improve their working conditions and support them, as particularly our frontline workers, as they encounter challenges on our system. So we've put forth a lot of effort in increased training and communication and peer support for employees through this action plan. And the third area of work really relates to our customers and partners, and recognizing that there's a lot of work we are doing within transit we need to continue to do as a transit agency to improve safety and security on our system. But fundamentally, we are in community, and many of the challenges that are highly visible on transit are challenges our communities more broadly are struggling with as well. So really looking for opportunities to build coalitions with community-based partners and engaging our riders in this work as well. I want to delve a little deeper into a primary area of focus within the plan, which is growing our layers of official presence. Since starting this plan back in 2022, we've made a lot of progress by building additional layers of personnel who are on our system, serving as eyes and ears, but also assisting customers and providing more interaction and hopefully a more welcoming environment for the people riding our system. So when we think about our official layers of presence, this starts with our Metro Transit Police Department. We have about 109 police officers full-time at Metro Transit now. We also have community service officers, which are out on our system interacting with customers as another layer of presence. Those are not sworn officers, but as community service officers, they are students pursuing careers in law enforcement. In February of last year, we launched the Transit Rider Investment Program, and we now have trip agents on our system. We continue to build the trip agent program, but trip agents are there to inspect fares, issue administrative citations when they find somebody to be non-fare compliant, but they're also trained to assist customers, providing information about how to reach certain destinations, wayfinding. They carry Narcan and are able to assist in medical emergencies. They also have radios so they can contact our transit control center and receive police support or other support as needed. Another layer of presence that we launched just under 2 years ago now, it was our supplemental security program, where we contract with private security for key high ridership locations where we've also received a lot of calls for police service or employee or rider complaints. So that becomes another set of people who are able to help deter issues as well as connect us or connect to the police department as needed. And then finally, the Transit Service Intervention Project was an initiative in the 2023 Transportation Omnibus Bill passed by the state legislature to pilot having more community-based organizations on specifically the light rail system to connect people with social services and also assist with code of conduct enforcement. While that program, as it was placed in law, expired at the end of June last year, we are continuing much of that work with community-based partners because we find a lot of value in working directly with people in the community who build relationship and trust with riders and can help connect them to services. I mentioned the Trip Agent Program, so I won't dwell on this, but this is a rapidly growing program. This time last year, we had 0 trip agents. We were just gearing up to start them on our system. And now we have about 70 trip agents. Right now, they're primarily focused on light rail, but we're expanding them to bus rapid transit as well. As Metro Transit continues to grow, we are going to continue to add trip agents. We plan to hire several dozen more yet this year, and we'll continue to evaluate the needed size of that program moving forward. All right, at this point, I'm going to hand it over to Service Development Director Adam Harrington to talk about Network Now and some other service improvements coming up. So, Adam.
Good evening, Mr. Harrington. Welcome.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members. Happy to be here. I'm going to talk a little bit about a project that we've been working on since December 2022 to really take a fresh look at our transit system. Since our travel patterns have changed, we had a number of suspended routes as a result of people working remotely and the change in travel patterns to our downtowns and really across the region. So our project called Network Now is our vision for how we can improve our system and really update it to the travel needs of today all the way out to 2027. So it's an action-oriented plan, and as you'll see on the screen, we've got 3 main components. I'll start with on the right because we've spent a lot of time engaging with our customers and communities and really analyzing ridership patterns, where people want to go, surveying our customers, as well as engaging with our community partners and thinking about how this relates to policy and land use development for Metro Transit. When we take all of that into account and we think about where we want to go, on the left, we're aiming at improving our metro lines, frequency and span of service, investing in microtransit, which you'll hear more about in a couple slides in advance, but also resolving some of those routes that have been suspended for the last 4 years and finally addressing and concluding some of those and reinvesting back some of that service back to our customers. Oop. There we go. So this is a snapshot of the Network Now concept plan that we shared with the public last fall. We spent quite a lot of time from September all the way through November out meeting with our customers, surveying our customers, holding meetings. And what we presented was a plan that across our system was an increase in service hours of 35% when we look at our entire system. So it's a really big investment. And you can see some of the highlights here that follow through from that first slide and simply naming some of those metro lines that we'll be implementing between now and the end of 2027. We got 1,600 comments back from our public engagement efforts, which we're really happy with. We actually got nearly the same or more when we were out engaging our customers in 2023 to help us think about what people were interested in before we began. And our aim is to really take those comments back, make modifications to the plan we presented last fall to respond to those, and bring it back to the council in March for their endorsement so we can continue to move forward on making these improvements. I'll just mention this map on the right illustrates all of the routes that would see improvements across the system, and the shaded green areas are the proposed microzones, which again I'll talk a little bit more about. There are 8 of them across the metro area that are really designed to provide access in areas where fixed route can't always do the job of providing access to multiple locations, but connecting back into the system at transit centers and metro lines. So before I continue on, just a diagram of where we are in the process. Again, we just finished up our community engagement process. Staff are in the details right now of finishing up modifications to that plan. I'm going to share with you some of those draft ideas tonight. So we're continue to work and refine those ideas, and again, bringing that back to the council in March 2025 for their endorsement. And then we're going to continue to work on the improvements that we actually have already been making across the year and leveraging the larger investments in the metro lines moving forward. So we heard specific things from our customers, and here's a summary of what they are now. 1,600 comments. I'm going to go into some of the stats on what we heard on the Bloomington routes, but again, there was a lot of support for the metro lines. There was a lot of support for speed and reliability investments. It's a phrase you may have heard of one program we've been rolling out to improve how we access our local communities and how we improve bus stop access and how we move those buses along a little bit more quickly throughout the day. An emphasis on providing all-day express service. That's key to this plan. We have 53 routes that are currently suspended. Most of those are commuter express. We had a model in 2019 that we had pursued over the decades that really provide a myriad of smaller express routes across the network. But given the big change in the travel market, we're trying to focus that down to those primary freeway corridors into the downtowns and providing all-day service so you have options to come and go a little bit more easily. And then particularly for Bloomington, more requests for better frequency of service and later night service as well as microtransit service. Here's a slide summarizing all the comments by route that touches Bloomington. So it's 15% of all the comments we received were about these routes. That doesn't mean they're all saying the same thing. They're not all saying we want more buses or we want them later, or some of them are safety security questions or better connections or facility improvements, whether it be 98th Bloomington South Transit Station or the Mall of America. But I just wanted to share that we're breaking this down in detail, and our staff are spending quite a lot of time to look at these and really understand what our customers are telling us. So, how do we compare where we were in 2019 to where we want to go with the framework? The bars on this page start at the bottom and go to the top. So pre-pandemic is really 2019, and the colors represent the number of service hours that we provide to the public for each one of these time segments. The blue are the local bus routes, the yellow are the metro lines and the BRT lines, and the red are the commuter express. Now, when we go up to our current service levels, we actually are providing a little bit more in Bloomington than we were in 2019. And we go up to the concept plan, we're providing even more service to Bloomington than we were in 2019 or today. And you'll notice the green, which is the Metro Micro Service Zone, which has been added. Just to anchor ourselves on the service we provide today in Bloomington. So this is a map of all the routes that are currently in operation. You can see the orange line in the middle on 35W, the red line up Cedar, the Route 542 on American Boulevard, which we can talk more about as well, and a number of the routes that provide that access throughout Bloomington. A snapshot of some of the changes. So this graph on the left represents our scheduled service and really our ridership throughout the day. You can see the peaks. These two peaks on the graph that are in black, that represents our pre-COVID or 2019 ridership across the day, and it's very peak oriented. That's the morning rush hour and the afternoon rush hour. Well, right now, this red line is much more subdued. It's not as sharp of a peak. We have got much more ridership even throughout the day, and so our service is aimed more to serve that need than providing that high peak service in the morning and afternoon. So what that means for Bloomington, on the chart below are the park and ride lots. You can see what the actual capacity is, what it's built to hold, and the 2024 usage where we're at today compared to the 2019 usage. So we're significantly down from where we were in 2019. And there's two facilities that we're not providing service to that we're proposing to discontinue. These are joint use agreements, and they're facilities that we own, so it would be a seamless transition to make that change. And again, we're providing different services to those other locations where we can really focus our service and provide, we think, better service in the rush hour and all day long. And actually on weekends, when you think about Orange Line now running from 5 a.m. to 1 a.m. 7 days a week. The other part of this graph is showing a change with 81st Street Transit layover near 35W. This was built 15, 20 years ago when we had many routes connecting here before Orange Line, before we had that access under the freeway. And now there's one route that uses it, but it's a really important route and a potential future BRT. and we use it for our turnaround and a restroom facility for our operator. You probably know that MnDOT's looking to use that space as part of the 494-35W, so we continue to work with your staff, which have been very helpful in trying to advocate for us and maintaining a good turnaround and layover facility for our operator as we move forward there. Now a little bit of a sneak peek on where we're headed. Again, the current network that I showed on the larger screen is on the left, and where we're making some of the bigger changes in our network is on the right. I'll first point out that the green shaded area here is just to represent the kind of area that Metro Microzone could cover. We recently started 2 new zones, one in Woodbury, one in Roseville, anchoring on those metro lines, but we spend a lot of time working with the cities to determine where those boundaries are. They won't be this smooth, nice circle here. There'll be a lot of work when we get to the point of adding a microzone for Bloomington, and we're aiming to do 2 new microzones per year as we move forward between now and 2027, and actually 2025 counts as another year. So we're hoping to add 2 more this year for microzones. A couple of the features on these maps I want to point out from a route structure standpoint. Again, one of the things we heard is more consistent frequency on the routes that we operate, and really trying to provide better connections to those primary destinations. On the left side, you'll see a number of boxes that correlate to the line on the map, 120 minutes. That means there's a bus trip every 120 minutes out there today. It's pretty wide. It's not what we would aim to do or want to have as a standard of service. We're going to be moving everything except for one route to every 30 minutes throughout the large span of the day, and 60 minutes for the route that's shown on the left, the Route 537, which is rerouted a little bit to provide some coverage to the western part of Bloomington there, and then on down France Avenue. So just to provide a little bit of a framework of, we've made some changes. This is a sneak peek. We're still refining this map a little bit and what might happen there, but our main goal is to provide better frequency, better connections, strong connections to Normandale Community College, strong connections at 98th Street Station and 35W, which, by the way, has one of the largest UPass usage stations in the system down here, as much as Mall of America. So we want to continue to focus on that and have good partnerships with Minnesota Valley as well, who also serves this location. Speaking of metro lines, snapshot, these are all on our website, so anyone can go out and look at them. The 3 main I wanted to focus on today are the orange line on the lower left. You can see the ridership continuing to grow there. And again, I mentioned in December, we just added more frequency of service to the orange line. So we expect that ridership to continue to climb. D line, which ends at Mall of America, has continued to grow. That's been a really great service. And blue line is really kind of growing incrementally. We did add more frequency to blue line last summer. It seems like it might be leveling off, but we're aiming to add 10-minute frequency to blue line in the coming year or so that we can start to boost those numbers as well. But it gives you some perspective on what we might expect from a metro line. So orange line BRT is carrying about 2,000 rides a day. D line BRT is carrying 14,000 rides a day. And blue line is carrying about 15 to 20,000 rides a day. So our growing metro network, I'm sharing this because there's a lot of lines that we're trying to get to throughout our network. We, as you know, had a robust planning process, and these are the priorities that we ended up with. We had hoped to implement a BRT every other year, but construction projects sometimes have a life of their own with many unknowns and a lot of coordination with both the roadway authority and utilities and local properties. But we're making really good progress, and this year we're opening 3 BRT lines while Southwest Green Line Extension LRT is still under construction. So it's a really big lift for us this year. This is going to be the feature for what we're aiming to implement in 2025 related to Network Now. And we have G line, F line, H line all in queue as projects that we have programmed out beyond 2027. So our next steps, as we see them and as we've communicated with your staff, are we're going to be completing our Network Now framework, but we still have more work to do and are interested in continuing the conversation on American Boulevard Transit Study, defining those metro microzones, working together on transit facilities that are really going to help our operation work well, whether that's ongoing maintenance to Mall of America or future development around 98th and Bloomington South Transit Station, or the small turnaround at 81st and 35W. There's a lot of key areas that we have partnership on. And then, of course, we want to work closely with you in communicating what these changes are once we're actually able to implement them. And we're really excited about all the things that we're doing. And, of course, you can always do more, but we're going at the speed of workforce and resources in terms of buses and facilities. So it all takes a little bit more, and we're really looking forward to continue our work here. So with that, I'll conclude, and we're happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harrington. Appreciate it. Council, questions for either Mr. Harrington or Ms. Caderas? Councilmember Nelson.
Thanks, Mayor. I've got two areas of questions, one safety and security. It indicated that there are currently 109 officers. What is the authorized strength, and how close are you to that?
Mayor, council member, the authorized strength in our 2025 budget is 171 full-time officers, so still quite a ways to grow towards that. Our police department has numerous recruitment and retention efforts underway, including a CSO Pathways program, which is a new approach to us last year to really try to recruit young people who are interested in careers in law enforcement and others who may be looking to change careers into law enforcement and support them towards becoming a police officer.
Okay, thank you. I didn't see in the presentation any numbers on crime and the direction it's going and all that. I also have a concern about some of the numbers because it's my understanding that they don't include other agencies' numbers of police activity on the line. So if our police officers had to intervene in a situation, that would not get counted in those numbers. Is that accurate? And so can you kind of give me a full picture of what's happening for safety?
So, Mayor, council member, first on crime stats, I mentioned ridership is going up. I should have mentioned crime is also going down. We're preparing to provide our quarterly update to the Metropolitan Council in a couple of weeks, and part of what we'll share with them is we are concluding 2024 with roughly a 6% decrease in crime compared to 2023. In terms of what is counted in those crime reports, my understanding is those are crime reports within the Metro Transit Police Department system. So depending on the particulars of the incident, it's possible what you're describing would not be counted. I will admit I am not a full expert on how we manage that data, so certainly we can follow up if there's more detailed questions.
Okay, thank you. And then part of the reason that I ask these questions, it's personal to me. My daughter lives in South Minneapolis, and I'll just be candid, she won't ride light rail. She's had too many negative experiences on there, and frankly, until security is really seriously addressed, I don't know how we get people back riding and feeling safe about that. So with that said, my next question on safety and security is a couple of years ago, we had a partnership, a joint powers agreement between the city and Metro Transit, and that was stopped. Is there any reconsideration of that or any looking at that again, utilizing the fact that Bloomington is at its full authorized strength of police officers and I think is ready and willing to partner with you so that assets can be deployed in the right areas?
No, I appreciate that, Mayor, council member. Before coming here tonight, I spoke with Interim Chief Joe Dotseth of our police department. He is not here this evening, but assured me that he is working and willing to continue to work with the Bloomington Police Department. In general, our interim chief has really put a priority on building strong relationships with or local law enforcement throughout our system. As I mentioned earlier, we are in over 75 communities across the metro, so those relationships are essential to public safety. I think in particular, I do recall the contracted overtime agreement with Bloomington, and I would say we should have the chief, Interim Chief Dotseth, I'm sure he'd be willing to talk further about opportunities in the future. We haven't actively talked about really looking at that, but certainly wouldn't refuse the conversation.
Okay. Thank you for that, and I appreciate the openness, and sounds like there might be more openness under the interim chief than there was previously, so thank you. In terms of service, I got a couple quick questions on it. Is it accurate that there is no bus service west of Normandale, or maybe extraordinarily limited, that maybe a block away from that? Is that, because I remember my younger daughter, different daughter, used to ride the bus over to Dred Scott. I don't know how she did that. Is that something that used to, like pre-COVID, happen?
Mr. Mayor, council member, yes. We had an express route that would run morning and afternoon, and I think it had 3 trips on it. There was a 588 and a 589 that would provide that service, and those were very lightly used by the time we got to 2019. And when COVID hit, it was just not much to come back to. And so we haven't had a lot of demand for that kind of service in those markets, so that we're just not proposing to bring those back.
Okay. Thank you for that information. So probably just my daughter riding it. So, and then there was a change. It looked like that I believe it's the 546 is no longer going to Normandale. Can you explain that and how that is going to be picked up? Because that's a concern. I know Normandale being the largest community college in the state, and a lot of young people, your stats showed that a lot of young people utilize your service. So it seems like that's a decrease in service for those young folks.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, council member, that's a really important destination for us too. And I would say that this map, because of the layers of the lines on the map, doesn't maybe represent what's going on as well. But certainly the 539, which serves Normandale today, will continue to serve Normandale, even though you can't see it go up and around or turn around and come back. It will, because I know that it's a little bit of a walk from the road. So we are going to continue on there. It's just on the below the other route line.
Okay.
And then the green line on this map is the route you're talking about. And so now this line is going to go all the way over to Normandale, up to Loman Plaza, and it will interline. It'll be the same bus that continues on and goes over to Normandale.
Okay.
The 539. So those 2 routes will go together.
They'll go together.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. Then the service hours, am I understanding correctly that you're expanding like evening service and things like that, as well as the frequency? So you'll have more options for people that need to get somewhere later?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, council member, typically what you see on our schedules is they're really scaled for the level of demand, and so it's higher frequency and there's more ridership. And as you get on into the evening, it's less and less. It's not necessarily that be later trips. There might be 1 or 2 that are later, but there'll be more trips. So if it's every hour at a certain time, it might be every half hour. So that's what we're aiming for. And once we get the plan finalized, those details will be in there. If you've seen the concept plan, we go through by time of day on what the frequency is for each one of those. So that's what we're aiming at.
Okay. And is this all similar for the weekends as well? Is there increased frequency and those things during the weekends as well?
Right. Mr. Mayor, council member, actually one of the things that we were aiming to in the concept plan, and we were reinforced with through the public involvement, is more service on weekends generally throughout the network, which is true here as well. And so you'll see on a number of these routes where it's hourly frequency on Saturday or Sunday. Those would move up to 30-minute frequency at some parts of the day as well.
Okay, thank you. Last question. Are there any changes to the 18 route? That was another one I think that had been asked about.
Well, let's see. That Route 18 has very good service already. We're going to be making sure we have 10-minute frequency throughout the day, which we do at some parts of the day. On those local routes that have very good frequency, what we're looking at doing is adding this, extending that higher frequency period of time so it's more earlier in the morning and later in the evening. I'm not saying late evening, but just widening that span of higher frequency.
Okay. Thank you for the information. Very much appreciate it.
Councilmember D'Alessandro.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for being here. Appreciate it. Two comments or questions for you. The first one was kind of a follow-up on 18. I think for me, the 18 bus, the biggest challenge was it didn't run after rush hour. It was kind of downtown in rush hour. You could get a pretty good service and then back out during rush hour, late rush hour. But I live literally 5 blocks from there, and I could never find a bus after 6 o'clock. And so, I don't ride it, right? So it's in line with this picture. I think there are 2 things I'd like to highlight. First off, I'd love to get your definition of what a metro microzone is, because I don't think I know exactly what that means. You've highlighted it here, and it looks awesome. I love green, but I don't know what that means. So if I could get you to answer that for me. And then secondly, one of the biggest challenges I think we have is east-west routes in Bloomington. We just don't have coverage going west to east. If I wanted to go from Normandale to the Mall of America, for example, that's a bit of a challenge unless I can time it right so that I'm getting on the 539 and I'm getting down to the American Boulevard line and getting over with the right timing and everything. So I'm curious about how we might be able to solve the east-west problem that we seem to have with Bloomington. But if you could answer those 2 questions, I don't know what you're thinking on those, but I'd love to hear more about that. But yeah, what a metro microzone actually means for us would be great.
Sure.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, Council Member, again, the metro microzone, what we're aiming at is to deliver a same-day service, app-enabled, so just similar to Uber or Lyft, you go to book your ride on your app. Our goal is that vehicle would be able to pick you up within 20 minutes of your booking. So that really constrains how far you can go with the 5 vehicles we'll have assigned to that area. So that's really the constraint for the distance. And that's why we need to work with the city to really define what those boundaries are so that we can have something we can all agree to provide that connection into the system. So again, it's app enabled. You call up, or you can call the dispatch if you're not comfortable with using the app, but you can request a ride from your location to destination. It will pick you up at the curb, bring you to that location. Multiple people can ride. There are bike racks that's lift equipped. There's a fare box on there if you want to use your Metro Pass. So there's a lot of different ways that you can take advantage of the service. And again, it'll be a coordinated effort with the city. As far as the Route 18 goes, what I didn't mention is that there are short lines on the schedule for the Route 18, so it may not go all the way down to the southern terminal every 10 minutes, and that's what you're experiencing. Maybe that's what your question was, Council Member, about how far south does it go. I don't know off the top of my head in the concept plan what the changes are, but I'm happy to get that information back to you. We're really close to having this finished up, so as we get towards March, we can certainly come back and give you that information specifically.
And then east-west in general?
Oh, yes, east-west in general. So to the 2 main corridors, it's really 98th Street, and we've got a really strong service that's going to continue to be that way, as well as along American Boulevard and on 76, those 2 pairs. So providing more consistent service there. The challenge that we've observed is what are those travel patterns between the north and south? How often does that happen? And so you'll see on this map, what we're trying to do is with this Route 537, which would go all the way down France Avenue and make this jog, provide that coverage, but would be an even service delivery between those 2 points. Mm-hmm. And that's the big trade-off from today, where it runs every 120 minutes and kind of jogs over to Penn Avenue and up. So we're trying to provide a better direct connection there, even though it's not completely direct, as well as the Lyndale service and the Nicollet service, the Route 18.
Okay, so yeah, thank you for that. I would say timing is going to be really valuable there, right? And so I'd love to see a study at some point to understand how many people are getting from one destination to another through a transfer or something like that, so we understand if it's working like we expected. Thank you for that, Mr. Mayor. I think that's everything for me. Thanks.
Thank you. Council, additional questions? Councilmember Mouat.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you so much for being here tonight. I guess I'm wondering, is the microzone concept the idea to move forward with intra-city travel, essentially? Because we did discuss there's really no service on the west side of Bloomington. And so is that the idea of moving forward to continue to serve residents and people who need to move inside the city? Is the microzone kind of the concept that would help with that so that we can get that movement within the city?
Mr. Mayor, Council Member, this micro service is, in some ways, could be used everywhere, and we've heard that. We want to be able to test it out and have some success. Part of what we're going to learn with this new microzone is how far we can go, as I mentioned, but we may learn as we're operating it that we can go farther than we thought. And so getting to the West Bloomington part of that would be a good model for this, because some of the routes we've tried in the past that serve West Bloomington, there just isn't enough regular ridership to really sustain that kind of regular route service. And that's where this type of service might be a better stopgap for it. Again, when we get there, I want to be able to add and provide that reliable service, so we'll have to test it as we go. But it is that kind of service, and as you look back at the whole regional map, we're looking at the whole region, there's a lot of areas in between where we're connecting at transit centers that are asking that same question.
Thank you, and that's very helpful, especially if you haven't heard, we've got some pretty big projects going on in Bloomington with the renovation of our ice gardens, new community health and wellness center, key areas where people I know will want to be using public transit and getting public transit too. And so I know our staff will continue to be very interested in how we can partner with you to allow that to happen. So thank you.
Council, additional questions? Councilmember Lohman.
Just a brief comment. I'll see you at the next 35W Solutions, where I can ask all my questions there. So good seeing you.
Yeah, you as well.
So just a couple of quick questions. You mentioned the 98th Street transit station was one of the highest use of the Metro Pass. Well, UPass. Explanation for that, or that doesn't seem like a logical spot for me, but any thought on that?
Mr. Mayor, part of what that does is it's a park and ride. All these routes connect there, so when I pulled the data on it, there's all the routes. All the routes have transfers that happen to Orange Line, or the MVTA route, which is a one-seat ride over to the U. It does go downtown like the Orange Line does, but it continues on over to the U. So between those two, it's a really attractive service to the U.
Yep. Used to ride on it all the time. So I want to commend you on the work that Met Transit has done on the official presence and to the different ways of looking at this. Chair Zelli and I have had this conversation for a few years now about the need for presence, because we certainly understand, I mean, there's being safe, and I'm glad to hear crime numbers are coming down, and then there's feeling safe. Right. And the feeling safe, I think, is exponentially more important. And I would just, I might offer a bit of suggestion. You, again, appreciate that the crime statistics are coming down, but I've got to imagine you knew the question was coming, especially from a suburban community of our size. And so to include that information in the presentation would have been helpful and would have been useful. And then just from a transparency standpoint, as I look at the Safety and Security Action Plan, the library, that the last progress report posted was for Q1 of 2024. And again, the transparency, our ability to look and to learn, just as a city council, but also as a public that is relying on Metro Transit to keep us safe as we ride public transit. So just some suggestions as you continue to move forward. So
thank you. I think Councilmember.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members, first of all, I want to thank you again for inviting us out here. This is very helpful even for me as a member, as a representative here, to hear directly about what's going on. And transit is just one of the parts of our relationships. There's economic development and housing. There's the parks and open spaces. We have all these opportunities. So you have my contact information. I may not have the answer, but I can get it. And so we can answer some of your questions rather than wait to another meeting or another invitation. But speaking of invitations, we have our State of the Region that's coming up this Thursday at Allianz Field. I think you'll meet some of your peers and others around there, and you'll hear where we are as the bigger picture. And where we're going in this coming year, and highlight, more importantly, what we've been doing, because we've had some successes, as you know, in local government. There's always challenges, though. So, anyway, thanks again, and I encourage you to join us on Thursday.
Absolutely, and I think I know we've got at least a couple of staff members, and I think I'm registered. As I look at Safa, I believe I'm registered. Yes, I will be there as well. So I'll see you on Thursday. So, well, great. Thank you so very much for coming to this evening. Thanks for the information. Moving on to our consent business this evening. Councilmember Mua has tonight's consent agenda. Councilmember Mua.
Thank you, Mayor. I haven't had any other holds. Any holds from anybody? Okay. Hearing none, I would move consent items 3.1 through 3.11 as stated.
Motion by Councilmember Mua, second by Councilmember D'Alessandro to accept tonight's consent agenda as stated. No further council discussion on this? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 6-0. Thank you, Councilmember Mua. Moving on to item 4 here, are hearings, resolutions, and ordinances, and our only public hearing this evening, this regarding our cable franchise renewal ordinance. Janine Hill, our communications administrator, is going to kick us off and turn it over to Brian Grogan, who is our attorney working on this. And good evening, Ms. Hill. Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor Bussey and council members. Tonight you will consider the approval of an ordinance renewing the grant of a cable franchise to Comcast to provide cable television services in Bloomington. We've been working on the renewal process over the last couple of years, and our longtime cable attorney, Brian Grogan, is with us here tonight to give you a short presentation on the key points of the new franchise. Brian is a shareholder and director with the Minneapolis law firm of Moss and Barnett, practicing in the firm's communications, business law, and infrastructure practice groups. Since 1988, Brian has worked with municipal entities in Minnesota and throughout the country on a variety of cable, telecom, wireless, and broadband communications issues. I will now turn it over to Brian.
Mr. Grogan, good evening. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor Bussey, members of the council. Again, for the record, Brian Grogan with Moss and Barnett, here working through your city attorney's office. I have actually been out in front of this city council since the early 1990s. This is the 4th time I've made a presentation about a new franchise, and at least the last 2 times I said you probably will never see me again. But here we are. We're here again. So I'll try to run through this quickly. I know you have a busy agenda tonight. Just a little bit about the industry. This is a changing industry. We all know that. Cable television from the 80s and the 90s is not what it once was. Now people are streaming services. But think about this contract in terms of your right-of-way. Who is in your right-of-way? We know about gas, electric, telephone. Those are all regulated at the state through the State Public Utilities Commission. Cable television is the only thing that's regulated at the local level for all practical purposes. You decide who gets a franchise and who gets into your rights-of-way. When you hold this franchise as a company, and you've had other companies besides Comcast, CenturyLink once held a franchise just like this, it gives them the right not only to provide cable service, but also to provide broadband service, telephone service, any services that they can over that wire, as long as the law doesn't prohibit them from doing it. So when you grant this, you're not just giving a company the right to provide plain old cable television service. It is much more than that. And it's a very valuable asset that you're giving, because it is the right to use your streets, put in their facilities, and then deliver these services. They pay fees to you for this. They only pay on the cable service portion. They don't pay on the broadband, they don't pay on the telephone, or anything else that they're able to offer over that. So your revenue on this is somewhat declining, because you're only getting on the cable TV portion, which obviously is, we don't have as many people buying that service. They're now buying Netflix or Hulu or your favorite over-the-top service. We do have some legislation at the state level that's actually trying to look at that issue of giving you, the city, the authority to now grant a franchise for broadband service. So that's something to keep an eye on. I see the mayor nodding his head. You're all very familiar with that. That's not what we're here to talk about tonight, but it's an important issue because it probably represents the future in terms of you controlling your right-of-way for the delivery of these services. Little background on this process. The last time you granted a franchise in the city was in 2015. It was a 10-year term. It's actually an expired state right now, so it's a carryover. We're passed by a little less than a month at this point. The company, Comcast, properly asked for renewal, and we have been working on it since. There were some delays in the middle there, just coming out of the COVID. I know we've talked about that a little bit tonight. So it's not as if we have been in 2 solid years of negotiations. There's been some stops and starts on it, but we are at the finish line tonight, potentially. A little bit about the key terms of this franchise. It's a 10-year franchise, just like the last one. I'm going to state with confidence that I will not be here in 10 years because we won't have yet another franchise at that point. Maybe I'll be proven wrong, but I do think we're moving to a different pathway for the delivery of this. This will be the stepping stone to get to that next level. Has the same 5% franchise fee that you've always had, so there's no increase in the fee. We did try to strengthen the definition of gross revenues to be as broad as federal law would allow us so that you can capture as much revenue off of this as possible. Again, remember, it only allows us to capture revenue on cable, not broadband, not anything else that they offer. We left in very strong customer service standards. The industry is starting to take that over for us because if people are dissatisfied with cable, they can move to Netflix or to another service. But they're there should the council ever wish to exercise those. Right-of-way management's a point that the city's very focused on. Your city attorney's office is very focused on right-of-way management. You have a lot going on in your streets and right-of-way right now. This franchise or contract, if you will, drives back to your city code. So if next year you direct your team to modify your city code to impose some additional obligation, this franchise will not supersede that. It'll actually be subordinate to your code, so your code will always govern. So you have the right to make changes as you deem necessary to protect your streets. Local programming. This is, while it's a narrowing band of programming, it is still important. This niche programming, people are watching us tonight on the channel. I know you may say, well, not a lot are, they may be streaming it. Again, a stepping stone to a full streaming atmosphere. So we call this PEG programming, Public Educational Governmental. One of the key things that through Janine's leadership we were able to negotiate is a stronger financial support for this programming. Because our subscribership's dropping, we need more revenue to be able to have these kinds of facilities and the high definition signals that you see. So that is one key financial change in the document. Enforcement in a contract is always important. We have a performance bond, we have a security fund, we have the ability to impose liquidated damages. You have not had to use those. Typically, you don't have to use them because everybody knows they're there. If they weren't there, there'd be a problem. So that's why you have an enforcement tool in a franchise. We're going to maintain all of your connections at the city so that you can continue to distribute the PEG programming. And then there'll be a continued complementary cable service, but to a smaller list of institutions. The monitor's out here where people can watch this, an example of a complementary service. Schools don't use those as much anymore. They're pretty much all broadband based. We used to worry about that. It's not as big of an issue these days. This is a big slide. All of a sudden my font got much smaller here because I wanted to put it on one slide. In 2015, we had this codified. So we took this franchise ordinance and we codified it as part of your city code. Through the work of your city attorney's office, we've determined that we don't really need to do that. It's fine to do it, but it's actually not necessary. And the preference would be that rather than continue to codify it, we'll simply have it set off as a separate exhibit. We'll adopt it as a franchise ordinance, but we don't have to actually put it into the code in the way that we have in the past. So you can see my description there. I won't read this. Everyone can look at the slide. But you're going to be asked to consider two things tonight. One would be an ordinance that essentially strikes the language out of your old code, right? So what we had in 2015, we're going to strike it and get rid of it. Then we're going to adopt this new franchise, if you so choose. And what you're also going to do at that time is basically create an appendix that will incorporate it there. So from the practical standpoint, there's no difference. It's just a stylistic way to say it's not going to have a code section. It's going to be an appendix, but it'll still be an adopted ordinance. It'll still govern for the next 10 years. With that, I'll pause and stand for any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Grogan. Council questions? No questions?
The key is to put a really confusing slide at the very end, and
well
then
done.
it
Well done.
mixes everyone up.
Well, don't go away. We're going to open the public hearing now, and we may need you in a moment here. I will open the public hearing on item 4.1 regarding our cable franchise renewal ordinance. Let folks know a couple of things about our public hearing. First of all, we'd appreciate anybody speaking. We need you to sign in. We need to know who you are. We have a 5-minute time limit, and we do have a shot clock to keep you on time. And when it hits 5 minutes, if you're still talking, I will stop you not because I'm mean, but because we want everybody to have the same amount of time to speak, and I want to be fair with everyone. And then if you ask specific questions, what we generally do is rather than try to answer them on the fly, we hold them to the end and we answer all the questions at the end of the public hearing. So those are the ground rules for the public hearing. Is there anyone in the council chambers wishing to speak to our public hearing on item 4.1, our cable franchise renewal ordinance? Please step on up. Good evening. Welcome.
Good evening. My name is Bobby Kathuria. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, council members. I didn't come to speak about Comcast. I came here to say something else. So if you don't mind, I'll say something about Comcast, and then I'll say what I was supposed to say.
As long as it's within 5 minutes, Bobby.
So I will tell you this. It's my personal opinion. Been living in Bloomington since 2002. I live off of Bush Lake Drive and Lindstrom. If you poll the voters of Bloomington about Comcast, you'll get more voters that will vote against Comcast than they'll vote in your elections. I guarantee you. We are so mad at Comcast, the way the service that they provide, and I wish we had another alternative. We had excavation and digging going on Lindstrom, and we had received some flyers from T-Mobile Fiber that they might be providing some service, so we thought we will get some competition. What happened to that? Are we going to be able to still be able to get T-Mobile Fiber, or Comcast is going to be the only one that we have to get the cable from or the internet from? I am asking that question. And you can answer that later if you want to. So that's my question, but I also came here just for the purpose of saying something else, which is a little bit about our community. I am from a Hindu community, and I'm going to say something about that right now. So my name is Bobby Kathuria. I'm a resident of Bloomington, and I've been living in Bloomington since 2002. I represent CONA, the Coalition of Hindus of North America.
Mr. Kathuria, can I ask, does this have to do specifically with the ordinance that we're talking about tonight?
No.
What we generally do, just by our ordinance, or by our rules of procedure here, is we don't allow statements outside of the topic that we're talking on.
Okay.
So there are opportunities for you to do that, and we'd love to hear you, especially in our listening sessions, which we hold prior to the council meetings.
Okay.
But just a general statement on something off topic, we don't allow that because it's...
Okay, my apologies. I won't say anything. I'll come to the next meeting, and I'll talk to you guys about that. But do please consider my comments about the Comcast, and let us know if we, the residents of Bloomington, will be able to get like T-Mobile Fiber or something else or not.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for the clarification. Anyone else in the chambers wishing to speak about our proposed cable franchise ordinance? Ms. Tolzman, do we have anyone on the phone?
Mr. Mayor, there's no one online.
Last call for anybody in the council chambers? Council, no one on the phone, no one coming forward in the council chambers to speak at tonight's public hearing on item 4.1. I would look for a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Motion by Councilmember Mua, second by Councilmember D'Alessandro to close the public hearing on item 4.1. No further council discussion. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 6-0. So to the question of what will be available, I think T-Mobile Fiber, if maybe you could help us out with this, Mr. Grogan. I think that's just fiber as opposed to cable TV services is my assumption, correct?
It's 100%. And it's a good question because sometimes people, myself included, think of them in the same way. It's a wire, it's on the street, it provides service, but broadband or internet service is something that we don't regulate in the same way that we do cable television services, which is what this franchise is about. So they are two different things.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Council, any comments, questions, thoughts on this proposed cable franchise renewal ordinance? Councilmember Lohman, this is our second franchise renewal ordinance for you and I.
Yeah, I was kind of mentioning that to them. I was, I had hair back then. All I wanted to really just say is I just appreciated the work that staff has done to try to improve the revenues that are coming into the city. It's always a pertinent question that that's on our minds, and I appreciate the hard work that was done to get us to where we're at today. And maybe in 10 years, these other council members won't see you come back.
Very good. Thank you.
Council, anything else? If there are no other questions or thoughts on this, council, I would look for action on item 4.1.
All right, Mayor.
Councilmember Lohman.
Mayor, I'll move to approve an ordinance amending chapters 1 and 20 of the city code, thereby designating uncodified ordinances as special ordinances, renewing the grant of a cable television franchise to Comcast to operate and maintain a cable system in the city, and creating Appendix D of the city code for uncodified special ordinances.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Lohman, second by Councilmember Mua, to approve the ordinance amending chapters 1 and 20 of the city code, designating an uncodified ordinances, special ordinances, and so on and so forth, as stated, regarding our cable franchise renewal ordinance. Any further council discussion on this? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 6-0. Councilmember Lohman, summary publication, please.
Move to adopt a resolution authorizing summary publication of the ordinance, amending chapters 1 and 20 of the city code, thereby designating uncodified ordinances as special ordinances, renewing the grant of a cable television franchise to Comcast to operate and maintain a cable system in the city, and creating Appendix D of the city code for uncodified special ordinances.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Lohman, second by Councilmember Mua for summary publication for item 4.1. I'll shorten that for you. Summary publication for item 4.1. No further council discussion on this. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 6-0. Mr. Grogan, thank you very much for your work on this. I know it's not a small task to pull all this together, and appreciate your work over the years as well for the city of Bloomington. It is greatly appreciated, and I don't want to say I hope we don't see you again, but I very good. I hope we don't see you again. Sounds good. Thank you. Thank you, Janine. Thanks for pulling this together. We're going to move on to our organizational business. Item 5.1 in our organizational business is a study item regarding co-living and SRO standards review. Nick Johnson and Emily Hesbeck are here to lead us through this. Good evening.
Hi, Mayor. Nice to see you all. Members of the council, I just want to be on the record that I'm a Gopher fan, not a Badger fan. Just want to be on the record about that.
Good to know.
Yeah, we're going to provide you an overview of our progress on the single-room occupancy co-living project. And just by way of mechanics, procedures, I'll just note that Emily Hesbeck is taking this project over as the project planner. So I just want to make that clear, but I'm certainly supporting her, and we're here presenting to you in tandem. So with that, Emily, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Nick. Good evening, Mayor and council members. So this is a study session, so we're looking for discussion kind of towards the end. The agenda will be to provide background on this topic, discuss the concept ordinance, go through discussion questions for feedback, and then talk about next steps. Cool. So here is a slide of the project timeline. So Nick has come before council before with the research and findings about this broader issue, and council requested that we come back with a draft ordinance. So that is what we have for you tonight. The process for this has been very deliberate. And we have a foundation for the ordinance to move forward with. We've gotten feedback from council and planning commission and also the HRA because the topic aligns with their strategic objectives, and it's been helpful to have their feedback.
Yeah, just to ground us here a little bit more. So what was accomplished at the first series of study sessions was really trying to lay out the initial findings of our research and trying to give the decision makers a general idea of what's happening, not only in the Twin Cities region, but around the country with respect to this topic. And so in terms of the policy decision making that was achieved during that first study session, it really focused on kind of broad concepts directionally of where we wanted to go as part of the project. So the things that we specifically talked about was amending the family definition in our zoning code. I'll talk a little bit more about that here in a minute. To clarify that co-living is allowed under roommate situation in low-density residential sites. It's actually already a permitted use in our code and certainly has been done informally as part of rental licenses for a long time. Creation of a co-living development use that involves adding a definition to our zoning code and adding it to use tables. And then adopting specific standards that apply to this new co-living use. So that can certainly involve parking. It involves other specific things that are unique to co-living. And maybe work that's even more fresh since we last visited the HRA board and the Planning Commission is that we've been doing additional work with our legal and environmental health staff on the Opportunity Housing Ordinance, figuring out how that integrates into that broader policy, as well as identifying some of the changes that we need to make to the rental housing chapter. I'll admit, though, that this one has been a more complex or spider web of connective tissue in our code than we probably originally even initially anticipated. So some additional work is needed based on what the draft that's even in this code. But we view these things really as just kind of enhancements, refinements, mechanics. We think the meat and potatoes of what the fundamental policy that we're trying to present to you is here in the draft of Exhibit A. So one might ask, why are we doing this? Why is this on our work plan? Why is the City of Bloomington looking at this use? Certainly it's becoming more popular in more housing-constrained markets in the United States where housing costs continue to rise and there's a lack of units that are in any way affordable. The main reason that the City of Bloomington looked at this use is that, as you can see here on our graph, since the adoption of our Opportunity Housing Ordinance, the city has been very successful at delivering on affordable units in the other bands of affordability. The 50%, 60%, 70, and 80% AMI units that we committed to as part of our decennial comprehensive plan. So the numbers on the bottom are what our goals are as identified in Met Council regional policy. And as you can see, we're doing very well at a number of those. Where we're not doing well is in the deeply affordable band of 30% AMI. It's no secret to the council. These are the most difficult units to create. They require typically a significant amount of subsidy per unit to create them. And so I've often heard Councilmember Nelson at some of these discussions talk about why don't we get out of our own way a little bit. Oftentimes cities adopt standards that can be difficult or rigorous to meet and do add to the cost of housing. Of course, they also address health, safety, welfare, things that do come up from a zoning perspective like parking and other things, and we'll talk about that. But the why of why we're here is really that co-living or SROs offer cities a regulatory pathway to allow for the development of more affordable housing that doesn't necessitate as much deep subsidy as some of the other forms of development. Now, how much support it will need of various types depends on the standards that cities adopt, and of course, on the back end of that, it depends on what the market is willing to build and the consumer is willing to absorb and utilize, of course. So, but that's generally the why. We've been successful at all these other bands. We haven't been successful. I would argue it is successful achieving some of those things in comparison to some of our peers, but as successful as we want to be. So this slide has the ability to get into the weeds if you want to go into the weeds. But basically, the zoning code includes a whole litany of definitions. In addition to that, our other chapters of our code also include definitions and how we regulate rental housing. The building code has a number of different definitions. I just want to focus on what the zoning code talks about first. So included in this ordinance, what we're putting forth to you would be amending the family definition that's in the zoning code, creating this co-living unit and co-living development definitions. These are new, and these would be created in order to apply different standards than, say, multifamily, which is probably its closest peer or related use. You have to define it. You have to define it in a way that's separate or different. One of the issues we have is that we have a lot of remnant historic uses in our code, a congregate living, boarding house, some of those types of uses, which we're really not seeing the development of those things, but in kind of a residential care setting. And so basically we have to do a number of different cleanups related to these old definitions. We kind of use this Venn diagram in the planning division quite a bit. A boarding house is different than a residential care facility, but our definition of congregate care applies to both of these uses uniformly. And there's standards applicable to congregate care living that we would not want to see in applicable to a typical co-living that doesn't provide some type of services. Yep. Thank you, Chief. So I don't know if I move the needle on your understanding on that slide whatsoever, but the point is that we have to clean up kind of these old zoning definitions, and we have to be clear what we mean, what is co-living versus residential care facility, and we don't want standards applicable to co-living that are more reflective of housing with services, if that makes sense. So that's really where the crux of that matter is. And as I said on the last slide, this is one of those topics that needs additional review from legal and environmental health, because what we don't want to have happen is someone to kind of misinterpret or misuse these different use definitions in a way that makes it complicated for the city later on down the road. So the use tables. When we were before you last time, what we talked about is that we generally thought that co-living development, again, its closest peer use or its akin use is multifamily residential. So the city has, after you define this use, after you create this use, the city has a decision to make around where should it be allowed and in what form should it be allowed in. The general guidance that we got from that meeting was that co-living should be allowed anywhere that multifamily is allowed. It makes sense. It's the closest equivalent use. So that's what you have before you in the draft ordinance, is that it's a permitted use in all of the high-density residential districts as well as the commercial zoning districts that allow residential uses. Now, for commercial districts that allow residential uses, it's typically allowed in a mixed-use format. You have to provide some level of non-residential use in order for residential uses to be developed there. So I want to be clear about that. The alternative to making this a permitted use would be to make it a conditional use. Now, the pros and the cons of that are, the pros are that it might allow you to consider the locational characteristics of the site with greater certainty than as a permitted use. It might allow you to address some of those potential health, safety, welfare issues that could arise with the use. The downside, and we've been having this discussion all last fall around streamlining and some of these other things, is that you also are increasing the barriers to development potentially. Not in all circumstances, but potentially. One other thing I would say about this, though, is that by limiting it to high-density residential districts, what you're doing is basically the only eligible sites that could create co-living now are the sites that already have this zoning designation. So they would be converting some form of their units to co-living, or they would be building a new building on site, potentially. But if not for that, a development application is going to necessitate a rezoning action, which, as we've discussed in the past, has the highest level of city discretion associated with it, much more so than a conditional use permit. So as you think about what districts to allow it in and in what designation, permitted or conditional, these are just some of the things that we'd ask you to think about as you consider this draft. With that, I'll turn it back to Emily.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, excuse me for just one second. Mr. Mayor, I apologize. Would it make sense to just write down all our questions and try to go back in this slide deck, or can we ask along the way, just because I want to be sure we're being relevant? What would your preference be?
I think if you guys are amenable to it, I think we could ask as we go along. Would that be okay? I just had a quick follow-up question on that previous slide then, if I may, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, let's not derail the conversation, but a follow-up question or clarifying question. Yeah.
Yeah, just a quick clarification. I know that, for example, the R3 designation is used for boarding houses and like care facilities, things with services. So is there an automatic requirement in these designations you're proposing here that there are more than a certain number of units? Is that why they be better designated in the same area as the multifamily? Is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah, one of the things, I am going to derail the conversation now with my answer.
For the record, Mr. Mayor, that was not Councilmember D'Alessandro.
Mayor, Councilmember D'Alessandro, I think you're thinking of the R4 zoning district, and that's okay. I get them confused too sometimes. But the R4 is like a remnant old zoning district that includes a wide variety of different residential uses in it that the city used to develop multifamily. But it's true that residential care facilities, often called group housing, does group housing over a certain number. There is a carve out in state statute for 6 or fewer. So anything that has 6 or has 7 or more has to have, in effect, a higher density residential zoning designation to allow it, or it's legally nonconforming in some circumstances. There was a period of time in the city where high density residential housing was approved in the R1 zoning district through a PD or plan unit development process also, just to make it more confusing. So in many cases, there are uses on-site zoned R1 or even R4 that aren't necessarily legally conforming to our code today.
I think my question is, I know that the R3 designation is used oftentimes when you convert a single-family house to a development, a six or less development. So that just happened, for example, next door to my house, right? So it went from a single-family home to an R3 home, which allows for a group home, essentially, of 6 or fewer. My question is, are we suggesting by this designation you have right in front of us here that co-living developments would never be less than 6 people?
Mayor, Councilmember D'Alessandro, according to our code, no, and we were kind of our own worst enemy in this regard, is that we wanted to make it explicitly clear that co-living, which is akin to having a roommate situation, you could have 4 unrelated people living together, and effectively your roommates. But this is a form of light co-living. In effect, you share one kitchen, you share bathroom facilities in many cases. So that is allowed under roommates. You can get a room rental, it's called. It actually is a defined use in our code, so it's allowed in R1.
Okay, so
you can still do co-living at lower than that number.
You're not suggesting then that this co-living development permitted use as you've defined here not also be available in R1 through R3. You're saying it's already handled because that's handled via the code for roommates.
That's correct.
Okay,
And the standards that we're going to talk about tonight apply to the higher density
Thank you. That's
iterations
all I needed to
or
understand. I
versions.
appreciate it. Thank you. Sorry for the interruption. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Back on track.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah, so the next couple of slides are about parking and use standards, and we just kind of wanted to make a comment that the more stringent the code requirements are on this stuff, the less likely it is that these developments, are the most affordable and accessible that they can possibly be. And so you might see that in some of our recommendations why we do certain things is kind of keeping that in mind. So, for example, for the parking, staff is recommending parking requirements be 0.5 spaces per one co-living unit. So the co-living unit is essentially like the sleeping area and the bathroom. And then we're not recommending a covered parking space because that adds extra cost. And then bike parking would require 1 spot per 4 co-living units and would be required to be mostly for long-term use.
And I will say that this is one of the discussion items that we're going to probe more later. So if there's any questions about that, there will be an opportunity to do so.
So on this slide, the second bullet point is talking about density calculations. So what we are proposing is that 3 co-living units would be equal to 1 dwelling unit. So since the co-living unit is just kind of the bedroom and probably the bathroom, we don't think that warrants being, well, it's not a dwelling unit. So we're proposing that when we do density calculations, that it would be kind of 3 to 1 for minimum and maximum density calculations in zoning districts, and then also for open space requirements for multifamily. And then, so not included in the draft ordinance attached to the packet was minimum unit floor area, minimum common area, or storage space requirements. Staff doesn't recommend storage space requirements, again, kind of because of the cost thing, but we will have questions later on about whether to establish minimum floor areas for each unit and for common areas. Also, design standards have been discussed about whether to require design standards for these developments that are applicable to multifamily uses, such as minimizing blank facades and ensuring building compatibility when there are multiple buildings on site.
So onto the definition of family. So the second maybe question someone will ask related to this project is, why does the definition of family in the Bloomington zoning code relate to co-living? Great question, fair question. The reason that it is relevant is that similar to how we have all these regulatory mechanisms which can affect the availability and affordability of housing in the city, the definition of family actually regulates the maximum occupancy of a single dwelling unit itself. And so there's a direct relationship between how we define family and how many people can reside in a dwelling. I should also note that the state building code also does this in various ways, typically just through square footage of how many people can occupy a bedroom, for example, as well as required common spaces. That's not what we're talking about here. So cities, there's two things. There's state building code, and then cities typically have a occupancy restriction, oftentimes rooted in this definition of family. So if you recall, a couple years ago, the city council adopted an ordinance to remove the family definition from our rental housing code. But this definition of family still exists in the zoning code. Right now, it allows for a family related under Minnesota law or for unrelated persons. The reason that this has kind of been on the staff and the city, I would say, radar screen for some time, mostly related to equity concerns about the government defining what a family is to people and residents. But related to this project, this suggestion actually came to staff directly from the public, from a developer who's engaged in trying to create intentional co-living communities in lower density residential areas. And so just frankly, what they said, one of the easiest things that cities can do to make housing more available and more affordable to people is just to increase or remove some of these occupancy restrictions that exist within dwellings. And so we have a staff recommended definition of family before you on this slide. That's what's reflected in the Exhibit A, the concept code changes that we presented to you. But we also wanted to present an alternative option. And as you can see on the slide that we're highlighting the work done in St. Paul, typically when we're before you, we don't highlight one individual city that has, in terms of the model, but the city of St. Paul really has put themselves forward as the model in this work. And the reason being is that they prepared an over 80-page report with numerous studies and citations on this work. And of course, St. Paul and Bloomington are different. I have to acknowledge that. But the point is that they've done substantial work in terms of the impacts of what some of these limitations and restrictions can offer. So what we would recommend to you is allowing 6 or fewer adults or any number of adults who are related to one another under Minnesota law, as well as children in their care, to live in a single housekeeping unit. The practical impact of that now is actually we had someone at the counter the other day who has a 5-bedroom house, and they, along with their tenants, wanted to bring on a 5th renter as part of that single home. They weren't allowed to do so because of our current definition of family. That's where the rubber meets the road with this kind of stuff. And they're a renter in good, or they're a tenant or a landlord in good standing, have excellent, record of their rental license. And credit to them, they're trying to follow the rules, they're asking questions, and this is kind of the practical impact of that. The second option, which is actually what the city of St. Paul adopted, was 6 or fewer adults together with minor children in their care living as a single housekeeping unit. The concern about following the St. Paul model, which is actually raised more with our environmental health staff, is that you do have some multi-generational families in Bloomington that have more than 6 related adults, living in a single home. Option 2 with what St. Paul went forward with would potentially create a problem there. You could imagine where you have a 17-year-old child in your care, the spring of their senior year of high school, they turn 18, and now a household is not in compliance with your occupancy restrictions. So I'll pause here just if there's any questions about this topic.
Thank you, Mayor. This is kind of a tangential thing, but I'm just curious about these two definitions. I know that a number of years back we had a conversation about the cemetery in terms of getting in there, and I'm just curious how different those definitions of family. So I remember we went through a long conversation at that point in time about redefining family members and the ability to get into the cemetery. And I'm just curious how different those are from these definitions.
That's a good question. I'm guessing we don't know if the top.
And I don't.
It might be a follow-up kind of.
Yeah, I think that's a follow-up situation, but that's what came to mind when I thought of this. Is that I would hate to go down the route of, and I know we're gonna have a conversation later on, but make this more equitable and then have that sitting out there. Mm-hmm. So that's the only point I wanted to make.
Fair enough. Councilmember Nelson.
Yeah. Thanks, Mayor. Very quick question: does guardianship include adoption?
It does.
Thanks.
Yes. Thank you for the question. Okay. Is there, well, we can keep moving. Back to parking, Ms. Hesbeck.
Yeah. So we just wanted to know your thoughts on the proposed parking requirements that were in the ordinance. So again, it was 0.5 per one co-living unit. 2 planning commission members suggested starting at 1 parking space per co-living unit, and then 1 planning commission member suggested offering incentives for more bicycle parking. So just kind of, do you think these standards are too low, too high? What are thoughts?
Mayor, if I may add one thing to that, is that with a lot of this, with a new use of a development type that has not strongly emerged yet in the region, is that to an extent, we have to do a lot of rapid prototyping. And I think that it will, be important in terms of how we evaluate and review any potential first developments that come through the door on things like this, to be cognizant of what the impacts are, how it's functioning, et cetera, and, be prepared to make those adjustments when necessary. But just wanted to highlight the fact it's not like some of our uses in our code where we have countless examples that we can go and study within our own community and have a really strong sense. Some of our parking requirement, as we're recommending, is higher than most of all of the communities actually that we've studied. But many of these communities are in more transit-rich and dense environments than Bloomington is as well. So it's a little bit of a challenge.
So let me ask this question. Given Bloomington as it is, the thought that went into this, was it envisioning new construction, or was this reuse of existing buildings? Because in my mind, I'm seeing reuse. I don't necessarily see new construction of this type of thing. So if we end up reuse, and actually heard a very interesting presentation last week at the U.S. Conference of Mayors from the Pew Foundation about older office buildings are perfectly suited for this. They have windows on the outside and all the plumbing in the middle for the, for the restroom facilities and for shared kitchen and all this. An office facility, an office building would already have parking. Are we considering this from a new construction standpoint, or a reuse of whether it's office or strip malls? I mean, that's another possibility, that type of thing where the parking is already in place. So is this kind of a discussion that we're not going to be requiring a whole lot of construction of parking because it's going to be there anyway?
Yeah, Mayor, thanks for that question. We're actually, if you'll recall, there's another project on the work plan. It's about the office conversion study, and co-living is a sub-element of that, because we've found that same literature, that same discussion is happening in the community development communities. Co-living is a better fit than apartments in some conversions, because they don't have to run the plumbing so many different areas, and it's already a costly endeavor in general to convert an office building. So that is on our radar screen. I think what we're endeavoring to do is try and create standards that are durable for both scenarios. We certainly could look at how those different scenarios should be evaluated from separate standards, and that's one of the things that the office conversion study is doing, but that's not limited to residential uses. We want to look at other things in addition to that. But I agree with your statement that I'm hearing the same discussion, that older office buildings are a good candidate for this. The good news, in addition to the parking, is that many of those sites are served by high-volume roadways that can handle more traffic, and oftentimes have some access to transit service in many locations. Not all, but in many. So I think it could be a good fit there.
Councilmember D'Alessandro.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Related to that, is there any reason given the fact that this is very nascent and would probably we'll find ourselves in revision over the course of the next 10 years or so. Is there any reason to put in a parking requirement? Could we just leave it alone and not have it there and like let it percolate based on whether we get a majority, to Mr. Mayor's point, of reuses where that doesn't become an issue at all, or we all of a sudden see, new development and we have to address the question. I just am curious about whether or not there's a reason to maybe ask the question or make a decision now. I think one of the commissioners, for example, said in the notes, right, maybe we should make it 1 because we could always make it lower, but it's harder to make it higher again, right? I just feel like we're a little bit in a place of like, we don't know. So what would be the downside of not making a requirement in the zoning code to start with in the first place, I guess?
Yeah, Mayor, Councilor D'Alessandro. So, and again, assuming that it's a permitted use because you have less of that conditional use permit layer to that element of it, which gives the city a little more discretion. Absent a standard, you theoretically could see the conversion of an existing building that does not have a lot of parking. Most Bloomington office sites do, but we do have some older ones that have been developed previously as office warehouse or those kinds of things, in even some commercially zoned areas that could do some conversions that don't have much of a parking supply at all. And so under those circumstances, I think you're being fairly reliant upon either them creating some as the market, as the developer thinks they need, which does happen, or it just functioning as is, existing conditions. So I agree on the rapid prototyping element of this project, and I do think there will be significant changes, but I think staff would advocate just to set a minimum somewhere, to start somewhere and adjust as needed from there.
Councilmember Nelson?
So, just a quick question. If we did make it higher, that would still provide the opportunity for a developer to come in and say, hey, I can't meet that. That's not going to work for me. They could do that. But if we make it lower because it's a permitted use, we'd then have no discretion about what they did. Am I just understanding those two polar?
You are, Mayor, Councilor Nelson, so that's correct. So one of the, we don't intend to get into the OHO incentives tonight. We can if you'd like to, but the parking incentive is not one of the things that we're contemplating adding because of the lower parking requirement. If we were suggesting a higher parking requirement, then we think it would make sense to absolutely add that incentive for co-living, similar to multifamily. But I agree with what you said. I think then the only pathway, and they certainly could pursue this, would be a planned development or other form of parking flexibility that is available to them in our code. Shared use, proof of parking. There's different tools that developers can use or property owners can use. So they could pursue that. But yes, they would have that pathway available to them.
Any additional questions, Councilmember Lohman?
I guess as I look at this, the question I kind of think about is the impact to the overall community around this development where it is. I mean, I hate to create too high of standards to essentially make the overall goal, which is trying to drive that overall rate lower to get to that overall goal that's stated by staff in terms of trying to get to that. So I wonder if some thing could be worked out in terms of, where you start to see those issues, you have that proof of parking that you could implement later on if you start seeing issues, or some other method to try to mitigate those issues on the back end of it, so that you don't slow down development. Because I'm just concerned that if we go into this too, having too high of a standard, sometimes developers just skip your entire city and go to another city where it's easier to build it. And I don't think that's the kind of the point that we're trying to accomplish. I just think about our experiment with ADUs, that we have all these things around. So that's just one council member's perspective as I look at this.
Mayor, one last final thought about parking is that some cities, and again, this is more characteristic of core cities, more urban cities, but either, of course, some are eliminating their parking requirements altogether. But many cities do offer some reduction as a result of proximity to transit service, and in some cases, actual use-specific reduction. So multifamily site within a quarter mile of a high-frequency transit line has a lower parking requirement than, if not, close to transit. So that's something we could look at for this, because I think the intent here is that these developments are in locations that are well served by transit, and if they're well served by transit, they need less parking. So, and I would also add that we are doing another project on the work plan this year, is our parking evaluation, kind of post-pandemic, post-online retailing. So that transit is something that's on our radar to include in that evaluation within that project of how that should affect our parking standards.
So council consensus, I mean, I think we agree the 1.6 that is set there for the Bloomington studio apartments is probably excessive. The thought of 1 versus 0.5, the pros and cons, or even going down to zero, as Councilmember D'Alessandro said, and let the market decide. Thoughts?
And if it helps, Mayor, sorry to interrupt, but if it helps, for if you had 6 co-living units effective, like with 1 pod, 1 shared kitchen, you'd effectively have to provide 3 parking spaces uncovered.
Okay.
Yep.
I mean, I'm comfortable, I think, with half as proposed here. I think I'm comfortable with that and see where it goes. And yeah, it would be hard if we wanted to adjust up, but it would be doable. It wouldn't be impossible. And if we wanted to adjust down, depending on what the market says, I think the half, the 0.5, I think makes good sense.
Yep. For me, Mr. Mayor, I just think we're being kind of arbitrary. So, throw a dart at it at this point. If that's what we're doing, 0.5 is fine. I just, you mentioned, Mr. Johnson, that someone has come and kind of proposed an opportunity with us. Did they have a point of view on parking?
They did not, Mayor Councilor D'Alessandro, they did not. They also are mostly working in Minneapolis and St. Paul, which don't have a parking requirement.
Right.
So it's not something that was on their radar in so much as they expressed that more rigorous standards likely would be a killer or a challenge for projects like theirs.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fine.
Councilmember Carter?
Thank you, Mayor. So I would be comfortable moving forward with the half stall per unit. And I would request that, like we've done with a lot of other things in a year, after we've executed on the change, or I guess after we've had something developed or repurposed, as the mayor was mentioning, that we do some kind of evaluation and figure out, what are we hearing from developers, and is it still too much? Should we just kind of go to 0, or if it's working well?
I think that makes good sense.
And Mr. Mayor,
D'Alessandro?
in related, I think we saw bicycle requirements. We didn't talk about that, but I'd say more bicycles better. To the extent that we don't have to make it a requirement per se, but if we can incentivize that, that would be good. That's my take on that too.
And scooters. I'm all about scooters.
Okay, next discussion question. So we want to know if you think the use standards should include a minimum floor area per unit. When we went to the Joint Planning Commission and HRA meeting, Commissioner and board members in general thought that there should be flexibility for the market to decide. And looking at other cities, staff has seen ranges between a minimum of 70 square feet and a maximum of 250 square feet. Like Nick mentioned earlier, the building code does also have like minimum size requirements for the number of occupants, so there will always be that too.
Which is 70 square feet for one person, just as a heads up.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that, please?
The building code requires 70 square feet for a bedroom, for a single person.
That's not inclusive of the bathroom, just the bedroom.
That's correct.
Thanks.
Yep.
And that's basically a walk-in closet. I mean, realistically, 70 square feet is a walk-in closet.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Thoughts on this, Council? Councilmember Carter?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm comfortable with letting the market determine this one. I think that there's a lot of, I think for this one, I think the more flexible that we are, the better off we'll be in actually seeing these types of units created. And so, yeah, that's where I'm at.
Councilmember D'Alessandro?
Mr. Mayor, if the building code automatically has 70, then don't we just let that apply and we don't necessarily have to add any additional burden here? Am I interpreting that correctly?
Yes, I think that's correct.
Okay, yeah, then I'm with you, Mr. Carter. I think that's fine.
Right. And the Planning Commission was on board with that as well, so.
That does reflect the feedback we got from
Everybody cool?
them at the HRA and concurrent meeting.
Okay, all right, we're good.
Okay, and then last discussion question that we have is, should use standards include minimum common space per unit? So this is going to be like the kitchen, and if there's like a living room or whatever else there may be. When we went to Planning Commission and HRA, 3 commissioners and board members were in favor of letting the market decide. And 1 commissioner thought the city should regulate the size to provide a better user experience for those who may be living there.
So if I could ask you, this is just the area of the space of the common area, as opposed to not a question of should there be a common area.
Correct, Mayor.
So, and I'm assuming somewhere this is written that folks have to cook somehow, right? And
Mayor, thank you. Yeah, there is requirements in the state building code around minimum living and cooking space for a dwelling, yes.
Okay. Thoughts, Council? Councilmember D'Alessandro.
As long as you ask for thoughts, I'm going to give them to you, Mr. Mayor. Even when you don't necessarily, I might. What are those? Do you, off the top of your head, Nick, I apologize, I'm going to ask you, do you know what the state requirements are?
I should. Forgive me, I don't off the top of my head right here. I don't.
Let me ask it this way then.
Yep.
Do you think, off the top of your head, do you recall that they're reasonable? Like we've not had any challenges to them
certainly.
or anything, right?
Yes, certainly. And I think one of the considerations around this one is how many units are sharing a kitchen. And so that's something that we haven't presented that this evening, but one of the things we're in more conversations. Environmental health has been very great to work with and been a great support as part of this. But I think one of the things that can affect the user experience is how many units are sharing a kitchen. And so that's something that we're still discussing. We didn't present that in our materials tonight because it's something that's ongoing. Didn't want to give it to you in kind of in the fluid mode. But it could be an issue of what are the minimum amenities that serve each unit. Are you sharing it with 10 roommates? Or are you sharing it with 6 roommates, for example? And so that's kind of more the conversation we're having, less so than around square footage, if that makes sense.
Thank you. That's super helpful because where I was going to go with this, Mr. Mayor, was if we have a state standard, we just defer to the state standard. Aside from the fact that that state standard should be applied for every X number of residents kind of thing. So if you have 5 residents and that's a reasonable accommodation, the state statute is reasonable for 5. If you decide you're going to do 10, you probably have to have 2 times that, right? Or something to that effect would be the way I would look at it. But I don't want us to get into a position where our code is in weird shape against state statute or whatever anyway. So if we deferred to state statute, but then maybe added an application to that you'll bring back to us, it sounds like, of how many people does that accurately serve in a reasonable way, then we could do a multiplier on that. For every X number of units that you expect a person to be housed in, you have to be able to accommodate, a kitchen of a certain state size.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Mary. And that, in addition to that, it's also proximity. So is the shared kitchen 200 feet away and down 3 flights of stairs? It's not very accessible. So those are the things that we're talking about right now to ensure that everyone has a good home to live in.
And just for clarification, just looking at this as an example, the 197 square foot bedrooms, I'm assuming single person occupancy. Is that correct? Or could this be 2 adults?
Mayor, the building code would allow 2 adults to reside in a room of that size. Yeah, I think it goes as low as actually 120 square feet in the state building code for 2.
Okay.
So that was good guidance. Thank you. We will bring something back to you on this topic. Generally, our next steps are just to refine the ordinance. As I've mentioned multiple times now, I owe legal and environmental health staff lunch for all the time they've been willing to support us and help us with this project. So we'll continue to work with legal and environmental health. Really what we're trying to achieve here this evening is make sure that you're comfortable with the direction that we're going, and that at this point in the process that this policy is ready for a public hearing process through an ordinance.
Well, if I'm reading the room here, I'm thinking you've heard the comments that folks have. I think there are some suggestions and ideas, but I think the general consensus is that yes, proceed, and we'll love to see what the Planning Commission talks about in March and bring this back to the City Council in April. Is that general consensus, Council?
Mr. Mayor, if I can ask for one other thing to maybe coincide with that City Council meeting in April, could we just get a bit of a recap on all of them kind of combined? Because, we've been working kind of piecemeal at these, but I'd love to see kind of a summary of this is where we're at with ADU, this is where we're at with SRO, this is where we're at with I don't know what the other one is, the missing middle stuff, like all the things. If we could just get a sense for it, maybe just a one-pager that just kind of describes where we're at in the process of all this, because there's a lot of moving parts, and it does seem like there's a lot of overlap, especially when we get down to definitions, like of per unit or family or whatever. It would be very helpful. I hope that's not an extra burden to ask to just get a summary.
I do think that makes sense, and not only just a summary, but a summary and just a 10,000-foot analysis of how they all work together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How it all kind of fits.
We can prepare that. We could do it as part of Bloomington this week, or as part of the formal presentation, or both.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Anything else, Council? If not,
thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate the time.
Item 5.2 is next, Council. This is an update on our small business programming. We've got Holly Masick, our Port Authority Administrator, and Barb Wolf, our Assistant Port Authority Administrator here. No formal action on this. This is just an update as to where we are and what's going on. Good evening. Welcome.
Good evening. Thank you for having us. Good evening, Mayor and Council members. As stated, I'm Barb Wolf, Assistant Port Authority Administrator, and Holly Masick, Port Authority Administrator, and we also have Kim Bergeron, our Community Development Director, here to answer any questions as well. Just to state, as the mayor already stated, there's no formal action this evening. We're just giving a presentation on our expanded small business programming in the city, and also to share updated recommendations on the previously scoped small business center. So as we all know, this work with the city is new. It's newer. So just focusing on some of the goals that we have for adding business assistance to our portfolio. So it's really important for us to build relationships and trust with our business community. All of this became clear through the pandemic. Reducing disparities so that we have equal opportunities for all businesses and making resources available to everybody across all of Bloomington. Changing the perception of in our community that we care for all of our businesses, not just in one area of the city. And also connecting our businesses with resources and each other. So when we look at the resources that are available, if we think back to 2020, we had one resource available, and that was the same one that we had available for over 10 years, and that was open to business with MCCD. So when we take a look at that, what we have now, we have several programs that we're offering and continuing adding to and building our relationships with organizations. So when we take a look at this, we have 3 different areas. So starting with small business services and outreach, if you take a look at this, we have city navigation, serving as a business navigator for businesses that are coming in, how they process through the permitting process at City Hall, intentional business engagement visits out in our community, city process improvements, like earlier in January, planning staff was here with the 6 ordinances, taking those comments that we hear from business owners and formalizing a process to move it forward and make improvements. Going out and welcoming businesses when they come in. Last year we added groundbreakings and ribbon cuttings and formalizing our process with that. And then also a business resources newsletter. We have over 2,500 subscribers to that, and working with our communications department to promote businesses through videos. So here's just an example of some of our ribbon cuttings and groundbreakings. We had 9 events last year, and so formalizing this process and making more of an intentionality of inviting more staff to these to celebrate all the work that staff is doing along with the business community and promoting and lifting them up.
Okay, if I could just say as staff,
Sure.
you need to point out to me that I'm wearing the same outfit in every one of those pictures. Come on, staff.
We need to go back to that?
Help me here.
I didn't even notice, Mayor. It's a very popular outfit, though, and it looks great. Yeah, classic, yeah. So our second bucket of advisory services, technical assistance, and networking, we have a number of different events that we partner with other organizations. So we do offer Welcoming Wednesdays where we have intentionality of technical business advising hours. This year, we're utilizing Hiromi Yoki with Next Stage. This will be our 3rd year offering Welcoming Wednesdays. We also have CEO Start, which is a cohort program for entrepreneurs. This is our graduating class of the 2nd cohort in 2024. That's a partnership with Hennepin County. We'll be holding our 3rd cohort that begins in March. We also have Elevate Hennepin, 30-plus different advisors on there offering free technical business advising hours. And Bloomington Business Connections is a partnership with the Minneapolis Regional Chamber. We had 6 events in Bloomington last year, and we have 4 slated for 2025. And again, our Open to Business program with MCCD. Our final one is direct financial assistance offered through city programming. So these are programs that we've developed. Hatch Bloomington, Scramblin' Egg was our winner of the pitch competition in 2024. We have Sewer Access Charge, a small business citywide credit program, which is a grant program, assisting businesses as they open, as they locate to our community or expand. This can be a significant cost for businesses. Also, a SAC Small Business Deferral Program, which is a low interest rate loan over 5 years. Site and Facade Improvement Program. Last year was our first year. We awarded $223,000 in our community for a $5.4 million investment. And in 2025, we have $200,000 for that program, and we already have 3 applications. We also have a business retention program that, due to development or private redevelopment of an area, if a business is dislocated, we offer $15,000 to help them relocate within Bloomington. I'd like to highlight our new partnership with the Minnesota Small Business Development Center. This is an organization that's overseen by Minnesota DEED, the Department of Employment and Economic Development. And all of this reports up to the Small Business Administration, which is a federal entity. So this is leveraging our federal dollars, matching that with funding. So we're making intentional programming, one-on-one technical assistance, seminars, workshops out in our community in different locations with different populations. So essentially creating a small business center without walls so that we can be more nimble and flexible out in the community. We've had a number of successful events. I'd just like to highlight working with the Zawadi Center and the leadership there. We held an event in December. We had 225 registrants for the event. Nearly 175,000 people that's a lot.
That's a lot, yeah.
175 people showed up. It was a lot, though. It was a lot. And then we've held 2 subsequent workshops where we had 19 attendees at one and 31 at the second one. So this is an example. Yusuf, the CEO there, is working with us. He knows this is pilot programming. What can we do in our business community to connect with entrepreneurs and small business owners, and how we can replicate that throughout our community. So that's a big part of the partnership with the Minnesota SBDC. They also have a program that's tried and true called the Community Entrepreneurship Program. This is an 8-month program that starts with a 6-week boot camp. We'll be holding that boot camp here in Bloomington, hosting 30 applicants for that, and that will start in April in our community. And so before I turn it over to Holly, I just want to, this is, you see lots of smiles and we've seen lots of them out in the business community. This is what brings me joy and the passion of connecting with business owners, telling them about the resources that are available. All the business owners learn in different ways, absorb the information in different ways, and a lot of it is happening with that one-on-one connection. And so just ending with some smiles here, and I will turn it over to Holly.
All right, thank you very much, Mayor and council members. We know, as we said, a lot of this programming is new, and so it is our intention to evaluate, to track, to make sure that we're delivering data to you to demonstrate the impact of these programs. Some of the things we will be tracking include, of course, program participation. We also are able to collect demographics of many of the program participation rates so that we can prove out our progress towards equitable economic development goals. We'll be tracking business grant and lending totals, and that's both our internal programs like our facade improvement grant and programs like the SBA lending programs that we'll be working with moving forward. There are other data sets that we are looking to grow over time but are challenging at the granular level, like the number of small businesses in Bloomington. Actually a very difficult number to arrive at, but we're working at it. And something we're hoping to track in the future, number and value of contracts the city has with small businesses in Bloomington. We know that's something that is being looked at here. And looking forward, we've done a lot so far. Barb did a wonderful job recapping. But some things that we are looking forward to trying in 2025 include continuing to pursue our small business services or small business center without walls model with the Small Business Development Center. We're looking to implement a CRM so we can continue to track of all of our business interactions. As we've mentioned, we're excited about this, and I think you are too, improving our permitting processes and navigation, and we're doing that in collaboration with others in community development and public works. And then exploring additional funding for small businesses, and I should say as well, unique funding types like Islamic financing that doesn't use interest and is a fee-based lending model instead. And we are also continuing to work well with our communications team, which is dedicating a lot of energy and collaboration with us to promote the business community in Bloomington. And with that, we will stand for questions.
Councilmember Carter.
Thank you, Mayor. So first, I just have to say, I think back to 2020 when I first started on council, and to your point earlier, Barb, just the fact that we weren't doing a ton to support small businesses, but the pandemic made it very apparent that we needed to do more. And it's incredible the amount of programming and support and resources and the relationships that have been developed in 5 years. So thank you for your leadership in this. I also will say I really appreciate the impact reporting, so thank you for that too. I guess probably one major concern that I have, we did have an advisory group for the Small Business Center, and so I guess I'm curious what has been communicated to that group. I think the original vision was a bricks and mortar, and now we are pivoting away from that, and I think it's for very understandable reasons. But I guess I just want to make sure that we close the loop with that group of individuals who spent a lot of time and energy creating that vision.
Thank you, Mayor and Councilmember Carter. We reconnected with the advisory committee in July of last year to update them on all the programming that we're doing. So there was 3 main recommendations that came out of the advisory committee. That was programming, partnerships, and systems. And so a lot of that was work that needed to be done pre-build so that those things are already existing before it's a physical space. And so that's what we went to work doing and providing all that. So updating the advisory committee with that was they were sort of blown away with everything that has been happening, and that's what they wanted to see, and that is happening. And so where it is making the biggest impact is to continue to do that. And it is allowing us to be flexible and nimble. I would say, well, I'll leave it at that.
Thank you.
Others? Councilmember D'Alessandro.
Thank you. Hi, Holly. Thank you very much. Hi, Barb. Good to see you as always. Would you mind putting the impact statements back? Because I had asked a question about this because I didn't see it. I don't think that was in the original documentation we got. So what I'm really understanding is what needle are we trying to move? And what I mean by that is our goal more small businesses in Bloomington, longevity of the businesses we have in Bloomington, is it just that the sentiment of the people that have businesses in Bloomington is higher? That's what I'm trying to understand. Because we can offer, like, I'm all for, all of this stuff is so great, right? And to Councilmember Carter's point, we weren't doing it before, and this has got to move, this has got to do good, right? And I'm excited about it. But if we're giving the money, for example, for the facade improvements, is the expectation that that's happening, and as a result of that, the people that accept that improvement are going to be there for the next 5 years, or and then we can measure that against what our expectations are, right? So I don't know how we can think about doing that, but there's doing the work, which is important no matter what, but then there's doing the work because we're trying to achieve a particular objective for the community. And I don't know if I know exactly what that is just yet. And as you all are, I'm sure you have something in your mind as you're defining this. And I would love to just understand that, what your outcomes, your expected outcomes are, and then how we can track towards those outcomes over and above just the demographic data and other stuff like that, which is really valuable and important.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Mayor and council members, Councilmember D'Alessandro, the reality is this is difficult to track. I do believe I sent some data earlier that shows at the state level the number of employees that are in small businesses, the number of business starts, the fraction of small businesses that are supported by underrepresented populations. So to some degree, the import is us building out that small business muscle because they're very important to the economy in general. For us, tracking, we've been talking a lot about this internally. Just tracking business starts is a difficult indicator because the reality is something like 50% of small businesses close in 5 years or something to that effect. So trying to track that data is important. It's also difficult, and it's also a reality that this is a group that is constantly in flux. However, we're looking at things like the vacancy rate in our small business areas, in our strip malls and commercial nodes. We will be looking at that. We will be looking at just ongoing relationships with the city, sentiment towards the city, which is measured in the business survey that goes out every other year, every third year. And I would say with programs like the Facade Improvement Grant, that one's very interesting because it has multiple impacts. One is, Barb quoted the investment figures. So if we spend $222,000, then $5 million is invested in the community. And in an ideal situation, they're using a lot of local contractors and they're investing that money back into the community as well. That's also an important interim step, as I mentioned with the commercial nodes. I know that there is a hope over time that those commercial nodes will really perhaps organically redevelop, begin to thrive in a different way, but in the interim, they need to be updated. They need to demonstrate to everyone who drives through our community that our businesses are active and healthy and that our neighborhoods are active and healthy. They may result in increased property values over time, which results in an increased tax base, but obviously we don't. The downside of that is that may impact businesses as well. So there's a lot with a program like that comes out, and that was a bit of a roundabout answer, but I will say that we have a lot more work to do. We have resources like the SBA, Hennepin County, and the state has a small business and entrepreneurship group particularly. They all have challenges tracking the impact, but they are all helping to put those numbers together for us.
Yeah, that was all really great. I appreciate the thoroughness of your answer there. I think I agree with you that it takes a village. I would maybe recommend that we think about this is a really interesting internship project for one of the MBAs over at U, because they've done stuff like this before, where they've come in as a cohort and helped us with some demographics and data and other things like that. I just think we have a lot of really good things going. And to your point, even a percent or two, trajectory change on that closings number. If we could say that Bloomington, everybody else, the average worldwide, nationwide, statewide is 50% of small businesses fail within 5 years. You know what it is here? It's 38%. That would be amazing, right? So it's just this little things like that, those kinds of things that I'm hoping that we have to be able to kind of track to. May not work out that way, but aspirationally it would be very cool if we could. Yeah, awesome. Thanks. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Anything else, Council? Well, I want to echo thanks and kudos and congratulations for taking this from 0 to 60 basically in just a few years, because when I talk about this publicly and basically tell people that up until 5 years ago we really didn't do a whole lot, it's that's very surprising that a city the size of Bloomington really didn't dig into this in the past, and B, it's surprising how much we've accomplished in this short time. My comment earlier about being safe and feeling safe, to your point, Councilmember D'Alessandro, there's seeing momentum and actually feeling momentum. And it feels like there's significant momentum in the Bloomington business community, both in the small businesses community, but also for larger businesses. We've seen it with a number of the larger businesses and the business relocations that are underway here in the city. Bloomington's the place to be right now. For whatever reason, it's doing very well. And I think in large part it's the work that you are doing and the perception that people have now of Bloomington and the work that they can get done here. So, well done. Well done to you and to all the staff working on it. Well done to the council, because I know this was a priority of the council over the past couple of years that we needed to do better. And I don't think there's a question in anyone's mind. We are doing better. So, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Item 5.3, Council, on the agenda is a discussion on our City Council involvement on boards and commissions. Emily Larson is here to talk us through this one. This was an offshoot of our conversation a couple of weeks ago, trying to figure out exactly what the council involvement should or could be and what the appropriate level was. And so we did task staff with taking a look at this and bringing some options forward. And based on the staff report, we do have some options brought forward, and we're going to have that conversation tonight. Good evening. Welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Thank you for inviting me here tonight. So the topic is city involvement or council involvement on boards and commissions. So I'll start by providing some background information to you all, just to level set, make sure we're on the same page about what we're talking about tonight. I will also share some information about the Bloomington Tomorrow Together strategic plan and how that relates to this conversation. I'll review some scenarios that you might consider and talk about next steps. So to review, at the January 6th council meeting a few weeks back, the City Council directed staff to provide options for recommendations for a consistent process and guidelines for City Council involvement on boards and commissions. Also, given that I am on the Community Outreach and Engagement Division, part of where I come from with this particular topic is also thinking about meaningful connection and public participation. So you'll see those themes this evening as well. So, what does City Code tell us about boards and commissions? We find this language in Chapter 2, Article 5, and tonight we're focused on the boards and commissions that are bolded on this slide. So I call these groups the Big Five. They're the Advisory Board of Health, the Creative Placemaking Commission, the Human Rights Commission, the Park Commission, and the Sustainability Commission. And then also, just relevant to point out tonight, the boards with an asterisk next to it also have some statutory requirements, which we could dig into offline if you are interested in more information there with assistance from the city attorney. The relevant language in code that I wanted to cover, there's a few different areas. So first, there's reference to service limits that specifies members not being able to serve more than 6 years in a row on a particular commission, and also specifies that no service limits apply to members of the Board of Review or to members of the City Council serving on a commission. There's also a section that specifies the relation to city council of these boards and commissions. So there's 3 areas that are indicated in code. The first is providing minutes after each meeting. The second is an annual report and work plan, which I think are coming forward at this time of year. And then also to participate in joint meetings upon request. For membership relevant to our conversation tonight, there's 2 commissions that reference council involvement. So the first is the Creative Placemaking Commission, and the second is the Sustainability Commission. And you'll notice there's a slight difference in the language for these 2 boards. The first, placemaking, says a member of the council may serve on the commission, and for sustainability, it says a member of the council shall serve on the commission. So we have had a council representative on the Sustainability Commission over the years. We have never had a representative on creative placemaking. Okay, so switching gears, I wanted to focus some time on the Connected and Welcoming Board and Commission initiative. And so as part of the Bloomington Tomorrow Together strategic plan, we are focused on improving our commission process and also doing strategic planning specific to this work. So in 2023, we did some engagement with commission members and staff liaisons and developed what's called a practical vision for boards and commissions. And in doing so, we asked commissioners what they wanted to see in place in 3 to 5 years to build connected and welcoming boards and commissions. And I wanted to remind you of this tonight because you'll see all the way to the right, one of the pillars of the vision is city council connection. And so thinking about having council members on boards or liaisons or some type of connection with commissions is something we've heard expressed by our current members. To learn more about these pillars, we also did a World Cafe conversation and continued to hear from other members of commissions that sometimes they feel unsure about their role as it relates to the city council and working with the council or the value that they bring to your work. As part of BTT, we've also implemented an annual experience survey. And when I say annual, I mean we've done it once and we're about to do it again. And so we started polling our commission members every year to get a sense of what their experience is like and see how we might improve that experience for others. So we had 33% of members complete the first survey last year, and you'll see a few highlights of that data here that points to overall a very high level of satisfaction with our commission members, or among our commission members. And also another theme related to council connection. So here's some quotes that I pulled from survey responses related to questions about areas for improvement or ways we could think about prioritizing our strategic initiatives within commissions. So thinking about having more intentional connection with council, more interaction with city government and with city council, and just thinking about having a representative in the room, especially considering that commissions are meant to advise the city council. So a few quotes of reference there. So in line with this theme, we put together some scenarios for consideration. And in some ways, this functions as a spectrum, going from no representation on council or on commissions with no time commitment, all the way over to being a regular informal representative of a commission. So I'll start with touch points and updates and thinking about what you might consider around a general process for council involvement. Right now, we're doing things like Commission Connect activities. We've had some meetings with the mayor and chairs in the past, and that relates to what we consider touch points and updates. So thinking about options like having annual joint meetings, maybe one per commission, having 1 to 2 touch points with commissions specifically during the work plan process so that commission members can be assured that they're on the right track with the work plan items they're pulling together. Considering discussions at city council study sessions to provide additional guidance or direction on certain initiatives, considering a biannual meeting or an annual meeting with the city manager, council members, and commission chairs, which is something we have explored in the past. So pulling together maybe an average of about 8 to 12 hours a year of commission connection. Moving on to the liaison option. This would be considering assigning council members to different commissions, but not necessarily having regular interaction at meetings or voting rights or being a formal member of that commission. So more of a consultative role. So that would be a commitment of perhaps 1 to 2 hours a month. It could vary depending on how you wanted to establish that liaison role. And then considering the option of having a council representative on each board or commission where you would have equal standing and voting rights, guiding decisions with the perspective of the council, you would see that being the highest level of time commitment, looking at about 2 to 4 hours a month, aligning with existing regular meetings. So what we are proposing from here is to gather additional input from staff and commission members to have a greater sense of what the perspective is of impact if we were to pursue these different options. And so we have the opportunity to leverage commission meetings and do a standard focus conversation where each commission would follow a discussion guide, and we'd compile those notes and themes for you so you can get a sense of what each group is thinking. We also have an opportunity to connect with staff at a liaison type of a focused conversation. And then I mentioned the annual experience survey. I was about to send it, and then we approached this topic earlier in the year. So I held off for a couple weeks to see if there was an interest in a custom question from this group. So that's something you could advise staff on today. And finally, a proposed timeline would be to do the engagement in February. So tap into those upcoming meetings and get the experience survey out there early in the month. We usually leave it open for about a month. There's also potential to do research to surrounding cities if there's an interest from this body to do so. And then we would come back in March with a report, discussion, direction, and decision, and start implementing in the spring, so March and April timeframe. I also included some appendix data related to commission representation if it is of interest to you, and we can also provide additional data in our next update. But this is where you can see we began collecting demographic data for commissions in 2019. So this is a compilation of all of those years and the race or ethnicity of those who have applied to serve on commissions. There's different ways we can work through this data. So if there's particular interest areas, we can bring that back to in the March update. And then we also took a look back to the best of our ability at the history of city council representation across different boards and commissions. So thinking about the HRA board, Port Authority, sustainability, and placemaking, and then looking at which council members have served on which boards for about the last 10 years. So that's also there for you. There may be some incomplete data, but it's another thing that we could dig into further if you were interested. And so with that, I know I went through very quickly, but I wanted to open things up to questions to see if I can provide further clarity, and now would be the time.
Council, questions on this? Councilmember Lohman.
I wanted to ask about the supplemental data that you had. So I understand that data is just the applicant data. Is there data available for those folks who are currently serving over that period of time?
Sure, Mayor and Councilmember Lohman, we do have that data. It just hasn't been organized in one place in the past. So it's something that staff can pull together.
Because I'd be interested to see if we've got these number of folks from these different groups that are here applying, how many get it. And the other demographic data I'm interested in is in terms of the breakdown of people's age limit too, in terms of, if we kind of go from a spectrum of being young all the way to old, what does the composition of our group look like? And then the last one I'd be interested in, if we have it, is gender.
Sure. Mayor, Councilmember Lohman, we do not collect data on gender.
I figured we didn't, but
we do collect on age. We have an age range. And all of our demographic data is optional, but we have, over the past 5 or so years, been able to build a good foundation of that data.
Council, do you have specific questions? I don't think there's a specific question. I think we're just basically open for discussion right now. Yeah. Councilmember D'Alessandro.
Thanks. One of the things that I thought was really interesting, just as a commentary here on the applicant data, if you go to the 2021 census, the correlation between the demographics of Bloomington and the demographics of our applicant data is high, which is crazy, right? So according to the U.S. Census, right, 69% white, we have 74% applicants. 11.2% black, 9% applicants are black. 5.2% of the population, 6% of the population are Asian. Like it's, I'm not saying that we're selecting the right people. I think that's Councilmember Lohman's question about like who's actually serving. But in terms of applicants, I thought that was very interesting. When I saw those numbers, I was like, oh, that's not bad. Fairly representative of the community then. That's nice to see, at least in terms of their willingness to apply and engage with us, which is great. So that was my first comment. Second comment is, I think you're awesome. You do great work. So thank you for coming to this. I know I was the one that threw this out. And as hopefully you can tell by what Emily brought to the table here, we do have some discrepancies to work through here, which I think is a really good thing for us to get resolved. If you're asking for commentary, I think you asked for a question for your survey. I think what we have. What I would be very interested in is, and I don't know the answer to this question, there's, as you know, we have a committee who could have had a council member and haven't. We have a committee who only ever had one council member, and we have committees who never had the option. I don't know how so I worry that we're going to get input from people who say like, oh, I'd love to have one, because they have literally no idea what that means, right? Versus people who may have had experience, or those who could have and decided not to. And I don't know how we get to that question to understand, like, to be more nuanced than just saying, yeah, we got 70% of the people that said here, they said they'd love one. But guess what? 100% of those 70% never had one. So they had no idea what they were signing up for. Like, and that's what I worry about, right? So I don't know how to solve for that, but if there's a way to create the question or qualify the question based on the lived experience of the individual who's answering the question, so we at least get a sense from, were you on a committee that had one? No. Would you have wished you had? If so, why? Were you on a committee that had one? Yes. Did you like it? Yes or no? That kind of thing. There might be a part A, B, C question there based on how you go about that. So that would be my thought on your question. I'm personally not a huge fan of the idea of a council member. I think I said this publicly last time, of council members on commissions, because I want them to act as independent bodies. But if they all want us to be there, that's a different question, right? I think then it might behoove us as a body to understand what that means our responsibility is. Are we coming to this body as an advocate for the commission that we're on, or are we coming back here, putting our council member hat on and making a series of different decisions through a different lens potentially, right? We don't, like, we could go that way, but I think we would need to have a very clear understanding of our role in that, if in fact then we end up all the way on the right-hand side, which is, yeah, one of us is on every committee. Yep. The only other thing I would say, Mayor, is I don't think we should have, I think voting rights are fine, but I don't think that the council members should be in the chair, vice chair, secretary area, simply because we get reapplied every year. And so that, like, I might be that person one year and then not that person the next year. And then I screw up the whole running of the committee kind of thing. So that'd be the only other thing I'd say that I didn't see in this report at all.
Thank you. Appreciate your comments, Councilmember. Yep. And to your point, I remember the conversation at the Bloomington Tomorrow Together, that work plan, when the group kind of came to, yeah, there should be a council member on each and every board and commission. But I think, as you stated, they had no idea what that meant. They thought it was a good idea, but they didn't necessarily know what it meant. And so I think it will be very interesting to have these focused conversations with the boards and commissions over the next month, because to hear what they have to say and see, to be a fly on the wall in the conversation, and I don't want to sit in on the conversations because then I think it affects the conversations if any of us are there. But I do think just the general themes that are brought up, the feeling, how they're perceiving what the benefit could be as opposed to the cost of having a council member on every commission. Be interested to hear what you learn over the next couple of weeks. So Councilmember Carter, then Councilmember Nelson, and then Councilmember Lohman. Okay. Councilmember Carter.
Thank you, Mayor. So I really like the idea of having more connection with the boards and commissions, and just being more closely aligned. I will just say that I have very serious concerns about the representative section. So much so that I don't even know if we should be asking that question. Quite frankly, I already have serious concerns about the accessibility of the roles that we're in. There are plenty of people I talk to who I try to encourage to run for city council, and they're like, I just couldn't do it from a time perspective. And as long as we're making $11,000 a year, and these are almost volunteer positions, the more requirements that we place on this position, the harder it is for other people to be able to commit to do it. And we're just making these roles more and more inaccessible for people. I mean, I will be honest, I have a full-time job, I have a family, I can barely put the hours in, and I just can't imagine adding one more thing. And again, I have a ton of privilege to be up here, and so adding more layers of obligation, it just really, really concerns me, and I personally don't even think we should be asking the question because it might come back to us. I will not support it. I can already say it now. It doesn't, in my mind, really matter what is said. But I would love to have more touch points and updates. And so if we could have a question in the survey that says, we want to build stronger connections, what do you think about, here are all the options, rank which you think would be the best. Annual joint meetings, I think that's number one. Biannual meetings with the city manager, that's number two. I want to be realistic about what we can expect of each other, and I don't want to put it out there if we're not willing to make that commitment. So that's where I'm at.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Nelson.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. In my mind, if there's a question in the survey to folks, I think, maybe framing it up, giving them a choice between, do they want to maintain their independence? Would they like some type of liaison? Would they like a full voting member? Which I'll repeat what I said last time, I'm very skeptical of that. I also have a concern because if I read correctly, we have 7 commissions, plus we have Port and HRA, which is 9, and then I counted, and there's 7 of us. So, the idea that we would have somebody on all of those, now I do think there's 2 that we would definitely not, like Merritt. I just don't think that's going to happen and that sort of thing. So I think there's 2 you'd wipe out, but it would require that all 7 members are able to have one commission. And to Councilmember Carter's point, I don't know if that's realistic, that everyone will be able to do that. Everyone has a slightly different situation. And I'm still apprehensive that it's good for the commission because I think their independence is important. I'm really excited about some of the stuff you have in touch points and updates. Even earlier today, we were talking about what the Planning Commission did. We had great staff, and staff usually does the presentations. Maybe we should have the commissioner or one of their members here more often to talk about their discussion, why they think it went one direction versus another direction, give us a little bit more flavor of that. Staff does a great job. I'm not trying to take anything away from them, but that might be instead of us, it's kind of us being there for them to work through those things. So I'm excited about those touch points and updates and opportunities to sort of connect with them more outside of having them have one of us sit in their meeting. And as you might expect, some of us might have personalities that may lead the discussion in a way that isn't productive for the commission. So.
Councilmember Mua.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree with a lot of the things that have been said up there. I do think I have a different perspective because I was just a resident when we did the BTT, and now having the experience as a council member now, I think the the ultimate goal was that commissions and boards just didn't feel like they had any connection to council. So aside from them coming to council once a year to present their plan, aside from that, when do we see them? Right? Like I could go like to the farmer's market and I wouldn't know anyone who might be on a board that we have out in the community. So I think ultimately for me, I just want to know and help our commissions understand that we are working together. We have tasked them with these assignments, and we care about what you're doing so that we can actually get that connection. And that doesn't necessarily mean that we're all sitting, each one of us is sitting in a room with them. Because I can, just from my own experience on HRA, I actively have to control the thoughts and ideas and opinions that I have, because I don't want to overpower the rest of the board that's up there. Obviously, there are times when you have to, you really have an opinion, you've got to get it out there, but like for the most part, you have to constrain yourself to allow other people to have space as well. And we talk about it all the time. Step up and step back, right? That's a part of what we do in co-ed. But all to say, like, I think it is essential that we create better connections with our boards and commissions. I think that question is without a doubt what we need to do. How we do it is going to be different. For us, I think for me personally, like, I think from October this year through December, with council, with HRA, with kids sports and all the other stuff, I think there was one day a week literally that I was home at night. And to add another thing to that, it gets really difficult to say, okay, this is worth doing, or okay, I can like justify skipping other things to do this. So my thoughts on that, but at the end, our connection needs to be better with the commissions, and that's what I want to see.
I will add also under the touch points and updates, one of the things that we have considered and actually tried to implement was to bring all the boards and commissions together. So they got to know each other better, understood a little bit better who they're working with, what the different boards and commissions are doing. And I think we've scheduled a handful of them. And I think Emily, Jamie, and I generally would make up a third or maybe a half of the people that were there. And so if we're going to do the touch points and updates, I think we have to do it among the commissions as well. And I think we need to look for ways to make it part of their responsibilities. Not come if you'd like to, but your board or commission better have two people there every time we do something like that. Because if we really want to do this in a meaningful way, we need to sit down face to face. We have the opportunity to do it now, and we should. So, Councilmember Lohman.
Oh, thank you. It's good to hear what other folks had to say. I guess when I look at this whole issue, I kind of start off with the web page, and I sent that to the city managers earlier today over the weekend, because I kind of took a moment to kind of step back and just kind of have a look at this. One of the things that's really confusing when you look at the web page, there really isn't. It's not clearly distinguished, at least to me, as I look, what the difference is between a board and a commission. I mean, I've been on this for years and lived here in this community, and it's just not really clear to me. And even when you go to the charter, it's not really all that clear as to what the differences are. In fact, if you go on the web page, it says, hey, if you've got some questions about this, when we reference you, and it takes you back to, section 5, in the charter, and it kind of talks about boards a little bit, but then it goes straight into talking about commissions. And so that's kind of the first part of confusion for me in terms of that. So then some boards were okay serving, the port, on HRA. But then on the other hand, we have these other, commissions that, we're going to find time to serve on. I know for the HRA, there's a little bit of pay that goes with that. I don't think there's any pay that goes with port. Is there pay that goes with port? So there's a little bit of pay that goes with those two.
Not that I saw.
Well, I'm just quoting what.
Okay.
I wasn't aware of. Some people aren't getting paid.
I hope so.
I'm dipping into something big here. Wish I wouldn't even brought that up. So just kind of keep focused here on people who are not getting paid. In terms of, just in terms of how we look at these things, there just seems to be some inequities in terms of who serves on those things, what makes sense. Certainly as I served on the Sustainability Commission, I have had the opportunity to keep my mouth shut a number of times, and I've been through a few experiences where there was something that I just didn't think would kind of pass mustard when we got it to this body, but I needed to be, in a sense, a liaison to that group to help them kind of draft their feelings and that type of thing. And then when it got up to the upper board, I didn't necessarily agree with where it was going. That was really a very difficult situation. And I know that those folks who serve on port and who serve on HRA have those types of experiences and have been there, where you have to kind of moderate between that. But I do think that it has been very useful for me to have that connection to that commission, or any of the other areas where I've had the opportunity to serve, on the fire pension, just to be able to kind of say, hey, we're working towards going to a full-time fire department. What does that mean for you guys? What do you think? What should I be thinking about as a policymaker as we kind of come back here to have that conversation? And so, I do hear you. I mean, I'm definitely busier. Kids are getting older. They're getting involved in things. And, certainly the pay, doesn't match what's going on. But I would never replace the time that I spent on either of those boards or other things that I've done because of what it's made me as a policymaker in terms of how I look at the information that I've gotten. And now there are some people who cannot serve that way. I remember talking to, a different mayor and said, hey, you got to step back if you just don't have the time to kind of do that. And I've made the time at great sacrifice to kind of do that. And I, as I look at these elements that are up here, and I oscillated. I know, Mayor, you remember whether or not it made sense to be a liaison. You get to vote on the stuff anyways, even on HRA. The stuff still comes before you a second time, so that hasn't been important to me. But what has been important is those moments where that commission has the question, and then what's the motivation to get you there? And I think my colleagues at the time, they said, what, if you vote, you're going to probably show up. And it's true. Hey, I want to be there, but I know if I got to vote, the rest of the commission's counting on me to meet that quorum to get there to make that vote. And so that's motivated me to make sure that, hey, I'm leaving for this or that kind of thing. Certainly I hear those folks that are concerned about, this is just one more responsibility, but that's kind of a contradiction because we have folks who are on other boards and that we take the time to serve on those boards. So I don't know. The last thing I was going to comment on is the vice chair thing. I got suckered into doing that because we couldn't find anybody else to do that on our commission. It's not something I wanted to do, but I did serve in that capacity because we had literally nobody else who wanted to do it. And so I ended up doing that. In hindsight, maybe I shouldn't have done that, but I was just trying to be a good steward of, and help my group out by serving as the vice chair. In fact, I've never had the opportunity to serve in a lot of roles in terms of leadership like that, and so it was kind of fun to have that opportunity. I got to chair one meeting for one portion of the time, and I definitely enjoyed that. So as we're looking at this, one of the things that I'd like to, just in summary to kind of wrap this up, is I'd like to see us clarify what it means in the charter for boards and commission. I really think that should be clarified, what that means in there, and writing that in there. I think once we get to a decision about what we need to do, I think we ought to write it into the charter in terms of what the role and responsibilities are of this council as it relates to what we're going to do. Because I think it's a promissory in terms of clarifying that. I'm glad this was brought up. We should clarify that, but we should lock it in so that we understand kind of going forward, this is what it looks like, in the charter. And then, finally, I do think there is some inequity in terms of pay. And if we're talking about recruiting and looking at folks, maybe we ought to look at how we pay folks that are on boards and how we pay folks that are on commissions, because I think there is some inequity there, and we ought to have a really look at it. I know this is not the time to bring up pay with the budget that we have, but I think we need to kind of have a look at that if we're trying to get folks motivated. And certainly I have written up more questions that I sent to the mayor, and hopefully the city manager can forward those and my comments, the full comments that I had, on to the rest of the council around this topic, because I do have several questions here. I'm not going to enumerate them all here, but I'd like to have some of these answered by the time we get done with this process.
Thank you, Councilmember. Appreciate your comments. So as I look at the timeline here, ultimately back before us sometime March, April. Councilmember Carter, I appreciated your thought of don't even bring it up as a possibility. But then I'm afraid we get back to, the comment that I made earlier to our friends from the Met Council. The question of crime was going to come up. The question of whether or not the council should be on there is going to come up. And then I think we should at least get their feedback. And if we make the decision that, no, we're not going to do that, to be able to explain why and bring it forward. But I'm confident that if we don't talk about it, it's going to be more of a topic of conversation than if it is talked about. So that's usually how those things work. It's the darndest thing. Everybody good on the timeline here? This seems to make sense. I think it makes sense. I think the engagement plan makes a lot of sense. As I said, interested to hear how it all comes back and to hear what the annual experience survey. And I think, Council, if you have ideas about what that specific question might be, maybe connect with Emily offline, and maybe if you, as you are writing the survey, if you could share that specific question with the council, just so we could have a chance to take a look at it and add our 2 cents on that, if that would be okay.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I can do that.
Okay. We good then, Council? Councilmember Lomit.
Obviously, it doesn't make sense for me to sit it on the sustainability question as we're going through this. But one other question that might be interesting to ask the Sustainability Commission, to the point of some of my colleagues here, would be to ask, what are some of the things that have worked well with having a city council representative, and what are some of the drawbacks of that? Because I think that might be illuminating, because I've been on that. I've been on there, and it's something you could also ask of the HRA and also the port, but those aren't commissions. So, but there are boards where this body does serve. So,
All right, I think we are good. Any other comments, Council? Thank you. Thanks much for pulling this all together, and looking forward to seeing what the results are. I'm actually very interested to see where this discussion leads. So, thanks much.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. I appreciate the direction you provided, and we'll see you later this year.
Thank you much. Our final item tonight, Council Item 5.4, our City Council Policy and Issue Update. I will kick it off. Just a quick recap of our City Council listening session earlier this evening. We had 4 speakers this evening. Dan Waleris from the Bloomington Sports Hall of Fame came in and we had the conversation about the Hall of Fame display that was currently at the Ice Garden. Had to be taken down now, obviously, with the work going on at the Ice Garden. And Dan and many others in the room had concerns about where it goes now, where it goes next. And I think we came to the understanding that the answer is we're not sure, because we're still trying to figure it all out, just in terms of size, in terms of where it might fit best, in terms of where this seems to be most appropriate. I think the general agreement was that this type of history, this type of feel is important, and we've got to find a place for it. It's just a matter of trying to figure it out and making sure it works within the construct of the Bloomington Ice Garden renovation and meeting their goals as well. Sally Ness spoke, and she had many comments, but she had 2 specific questions that I answered, whether or not we would open an internal investigation with some of her concerns, and the answer was no. And then the other question was whether or not we would go back into 10-year-old Bloomington police records and make changes to those, and I told her that simply does not happen. They are public records based on the thoughts and observations of officers at that time. There is no provision to go back in and edit them, especially a decade later, so that won't be happening either. Alan Redding from the Bloomington Parents Alliance, he and his organization have concerns about the 2024 Omar Bondarud Award video, and is concerned that it encourages harassment against his organization. The video has been taken down from Bloomington social media feeds and other possible feeds, so YouTube and our Facebook feed and so on. And again, the city's looking at it, trying to figure out the best way to proceed, whether it's an edit, whether it's a redo. We're just trying to figure out the best way to proceed on this, and I'm sure we'll have that straightened out in just a few days, just a few days. And Pastor Tracy, was it Greenfield? Help me with that last name. I couldn't. I think it was Greenfield. Yep, Pastor Tracy Greenfield, who is a pastor of a local church. They're looking for a place to call their church home and was asking about possibilities here in the city of Bloomington. We put Pastor Greenfield in touch with our planning staff to answer any questions about how it would all fit together, whether or not it could be in an industrial or a business zone or how it all works. The planning staff has all those answers, and we sent him that direction. And so hopefully something will work out for Pastor Greenfield and his congregation here in the city of Bloomington. The other update I wanted to give to you, council, was last weekend. Last weekend I was in Washington, D.C. for the U.S. Conference of Mayors meeting, and it was a great meeting and a very interesting experience to be in the city right before the inauguration. I've never been in Washington before where there was armored and armed personnel carriers on the streets blocking traffic in different ways. So I've never experienced Washington, D.C. like that before. The meeting itself was actually very good. We talked about a number of different things. There was a lot of good connections made. There are two specific groups, like every organization, they break down into subgroups and subcommittees and so on. And the two that I'm gravitating toward and have made good connections with are the group working on hospitality and tourism, chaired by the mayor of Anaheim, shockingly, and had a very good conversation with her and hope to be more involved with that organization, that group. And then the second one, and it's very well related, was the CHIPS, the CHIPS group, and it's a group of mayors working on that. I will say it was encouraging to hear, obviously, millions of dollars going to CHIPS research, to CHIPS construction, and so on, including some massive plants in places like Phoenix and in Ohio. And to hear that in Ohio, the first chip will come out of that plant in 2029. 28 or 29. And when you consider here in Bloomington, we have two of our companies that received funding, and they will be able to turn around chips in about 12 to 18 months. And so it's an entirely different animal. Proud of our folks at Skywater and Polar for the work that they did putting those applications together, and look forward to seeing being there when we cut the ribbon and get those open and producing chips that are just so absolutely necessary here in the United States. But all in all, a very good meeting and a very good connection. Had an opportunity to meet with our new U.S. member of Congress, Kelly Morrison. It was good to see her and talk to her. Met also with Tina Smith's office. Was not able to meet with Senator Klobuchar. She was actually the chair of the Rules Committee for the inauguration, and when all of that changed, it was just a mess, and she wasn't able to meet. But a good meeting. All in all, a very good meeting and a good weekend out in D.C. Madam City Manager, anything to report?
Well, Mayor and council members, I think tonight just the report would be that my co-city manager, Elizabeth Tolzman, and we're 3 weeks into this process. Things are going well. Staff are amazing and continue to move work forward. I would say the last couple of weeks, we've all been very busy with a lot of changes that we're reading about and learning about. And everyone's navigating very well through these changes. So we'll come with different updates as we progress through these Monday evenings, but excited to be here and helping to keep us moving along.
Very good. Thank you. Council, any questions? Any questions okay, anything to report, Council? Councilmember Mua and then Councilmember D'Alessandro. Councilmember Mua.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to publicly shout out our Parks and Rec department. I've had the privilege of attending 2 outdoor skating events, the Jefferson Mites Outdoor Classic, and then also last weekend with the Winterfest Blades and Bites. And the ice was perfect. The temperature was fantastic. We had great weather. Staff was just incredible in approaching residents who were there, making sure people were warm, having enough skates, just interacting with people. And I was just very, very impressed with just the level of attention to detail that our staff put into it. So Ms. Catry, please send my thanks to our Parks and Rec staff, because I know it doesn't just happen. It takes a lot of work and dedication from a lot of people. And so really excited about the fantastic events we had and how well they went off.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember D'Alessandro.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's fun. 2 things. The first one is, as we were talking about the commissions tonight, I am not familiar about when we're going to see the other commissions come forward. I know we've had Planning Commission, and I think we've had Sustainability Commission already, but I don't know if we've gotten the reports on the other ones yet. And so I was just kind of curious when they might be showing up.
I'm hearing the whisper behind me, March.
March? Okay, great. Yeah, excited for that. Just wanted to make sure they were on radar.
Any thoughts on that? Updates?
Mayor, members, there was a couple of years ago some discussion about the timing of that and not wanting them all to be in January because of the timing of their work plans and when they start that. So we'll double check. We have a meeting about it tomorrow morning and we can report back. But I have a recollection of March.
I think that might be right. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. So the other thing I wanted to bring up, so I've talked about this a couple of times, and I think it just got overlooked. And so I just want to make sure, I've got this a specific request from a constituent. So in section 13.25 of our licensing code around, it's called special event licensing, where for like liquor establishments or restaurants or whatever, we have this, what I think, Lona's take on it, arbitrary limit to the number of events that an individual can do during a period of time. So specifically, it says a special event, no more than 3 special events shall take place at any one location within a 12-month period. And I can tell you for a fact, for our good friends at 9 Mile Brewing, that is a problem. Right? They can't use their outdoor spaces because they expand their outdoor space to include their parking lot, and they can't do it during their prime time, like May through October, because if they wanted to have one a month, they couldn't do that. They could only have 3, right? And so I don't know why. Last time we looked at this was back in 2022, and I remember talking to the clerk's office about this at the time, and we did make a change that they could, from like there was like a limit on no more than once every 30 days or something like that. We took that out, but we didn't fix this part of it. And so I was hoping that we could talk about if there's a really good reason why that is, I'd love to know it. But more importantly, is there a way for us to look at creating a kind of a special event license that's seasonal, that applies specifically between, like, I'm making this up, but like April 1st and October 31st, that says during this period of time, because it's outdoor, because it's Bloomington and we like being outdoors too, you can have, up to 10 events or something like that using this license. I don't know how we feel about this, but it doesn't feel to me like there's any good or bad reason to have it like it is, which means it's pretty okay for us to maybe change it as long as we all feel comfortable. And so I wanted to throw that out there to the group.
And I see a lot of nodding heads. I think it's worth the conversation. If I recall, that number was set because we wanted to avoid a perpetual special event. A 6-month special event where they're always out in the parking lot, and then it becomes not anything special. So
right.
I think that was the reasoning behind it. Why the number 3, I don't know. But why the number 10, who knows? I mean,
I'm making it up.
But I think it's worth the conversation and worth having, especially, you're right. I mean, the outdoor season in Minnesota is short enough, so the more opportunities we have and businesses have to cash in on that, we should give them those opportunities. So okay. I think, does everyone agree that we should perhaps consider this or talk about it and ask staff to take a look at this and maybe bring back some options for us? Councilmember Nelson?
Yeah, I support looking at it. Just one quick comment. 9 Mile may be a slightly different use than other places. I know like North Star has done events as well, but there's an apartment directly across the street.
Yep.
Versus an industrial area where you're going to, the night watchman is going to listen to whatever's going on. So I just think as part of that process, we need to be mindful of the unique characteristics of different locations.
Yes, I agree with that completely, Councilmember Nelson. In this particular section of the code, it doesn't say or not say anything like that. There's other sections of the code that noise ordinance and time of service and when they have to close and all that. I think that it covers those. And to your point, Mr. Mayor, there is a requirement here that an organization shall not be granted more than 3 4 special day event licenses, 4 3 special day licenses, or 6 2 special day event licenses, and then on top of that, there's this thing on 3 for any one location. So a little bit of a cleanup on that, but maintaining, to your point, like, no, you can't have a 6-month event. Like, that kind of thing makes sense. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it. I'd love for us to get some looking at that if that's possible. So it's 13.25, and there is a $440 license fee on top of any other license that is paid by the folks. So if we want to create a new type of license that's seasonal and raise that fee to $1,000 or so, I mean, I don't know what our plan is, but there's probably options we could consider there too that would give some flexibility.
Very good. Thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Councilmember Lohman.
Well, I just wanted to say just a few things here. One, wanted to just thank the staff for their work in meeting management this evening in terms of trying to look at the time with all the topics that we covered and the ground we covered, even the introductory thing, really well done, and looking forward to seeing what that looks like. Next, I wanted to just mention, we've had some national disasters that have happened out there, and certainly our climate has changed, and I think of those residents in LA, and it just makes me think about this idea of climate resilience. And I'm just hoping, and I know that probably came up, when you were at your at your mayoral conference, and I just hope that we're, doing everything we can, given the circumstances, situations that we have to kind of prepare for those things here. And then just as much as we can help our neighbors, because we surely can see in that event that even the neighbors are impacted. And then, certainly the changes in Washington, I know that that staff is preparing and looking into those items. And then with that being said, I just, as we come out of our last budget season, Mayor, I am certainly concerned about our budget items, and I look to staff if there's anything that I can study and look at to get in preparation for this next budget session. I'd like to start having those conversations. I know we've got a plan, but I'm just a little. I've never been this anxious before a budget cycle, but I'm certainly feeling that, and I just want to just be sure that I'm able to spend as much time preparing for that and just doing everything that I can possible. So if there's things that you would recommend, Mayor or city managers, I'd like to have those conversations, because I just want to be sure we're on top of that, given our current composition, the way we look. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Council, anything else? Not seeing a hand go up. Our last item, folks, I would entertain a motion to adjourn tonight. Motion by Councilmember D'Alessandro, second by Councilmember Moore to adjourn this evening. No further council discussion on this. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, 6-0. We are adjourned. Thank you much, Council. Great conversation tonight. Thanks to staff. A lot of good stuff tonight, and it worked well. Thank you so very much. Thanks to Chief Hodges and his folks for their work tonight, and everyone else. And thanks to our members of the public who tuned in and who participated this evening. Everybody have a great Tuesday. Thanks.